Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. Dragon Ball Heroes, the Japanese card battle sensation, has finally made its way stateside in the form of Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission on the Nintendo Switch. We learned new details about the very troubled development of Bioware's Anthem. Funimation has a dubious new Dragon Ball Z box set on the horizon, and the video game discourse is once again mired in some very stupid controversies. All this on and more on a very busy episode of the podcast. Sean, how have you been?
I've been very good so far this week. I also was reading, because you wrote the introduction this time.
I did.
On the podcast, learning from the mistakes of the past. You wrote out the intro, and I've just been trying to come up with a good joke about the word dubious related to anime and like dubs. And I didn't, because also like that's not particularly applicable to this specific situation. I just want to put that out there in the world for people to think about. And so when the situation is appropriate, there's got to be some sort of very terrible joke you can do with that information.
I mean, there is something slightly dubious, I don't know how you want to say it, about I think Funimation still using their original DBZ dub in 2019.
Yeah.
Because it's awful, and they've done such better jobs with it. Like, I know it would cost an arm and a leg, but if I were Sean Schemmel and Chris Sabat, I'd want to get back in the studio and redo a lot of that.
I mean, it's the weird thing because they basically did with Kai, but Kai is sort of a different show at some point. And so,
but they don't like sell Kai over and over and over again. They sell DBZ over and over and over again, and you can't just edit the Kai lines in there because it would be very back and forth awkward.
Although that would be in keeping with a lot of the way that like Dragon Ball Kai worked to then go the other way and flow it back into this like one line is like old Grandma Frieza, and then the next line is like good modern Frieza. It's just like, fuck it. You just put those things next to each other. Nobody will notice the difference, right?
Probably not. Anyway, if you can't tell, this is going to be a fairly Dragon Ball heavy episode of the show because we got a new video game that I've been playing the absolute shit out of this weekend, Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission. So we're going to talk about that. There was some big Dragon Ball news in the form of Funimation's weird new box set, so I want to talk about that. But it's not all worth going over. As I said in my intro, we had this bombshell report out of Bioware this week, or out of Kotaku this week, about Bioware and Anthem, and it was so much worse than we thought, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, like, it was worse than you ever like normally expect. At the same time, I feel like you can basically take Jason Schreier's stuff he's written about Bioware in the past and just Control F Dragon Age or Mass Effect Andromeda and just fucking put Anthem in there. And there are some specific details of like the length of time they've been working on Anthem that makes it feel worse. But it's most of the things you just look at this as like a... I was thinking this week because, I've been playing Sekiro and all that kind of stuff. And all of those From Software games are from this generation of video game narratives that are really obsessed with cycles. And Sekiro's a little bit away from that, but BioWare, a lot of BioWare's games like to do the whole cycle thing. Nier Automata does the cycle thing, like Halo does the cycle thing, Assassin's Creed, like so many games like to talk about like the cycle of history and all this shit, and the forerunners of the past, all of that. And I think maybe the reason why the video game industry is so obsessed with that fucking meta-narrative is because it seems to me, based on all the reports we get, anytime we get a good in-depth report from video game like industry stuff, which is almost always by Jason Schreier, it's always the same fucking shit that's happening over and over and over again, and we're stuck in the cycle of hell. And so maybe that's why we keep on telling stories about hell cycles in video games. I don't know.
Someone needs to write the master's thesis about how the Reapers in Mass Effect represent capitalism in the video game industry.
Yes, exactly. And the synthesis solution at the end is of course the metaphor for unionization. There we go.
And that's correct because it's the right answer.
Yes.
Because if you just destroy capitalism, it's going to come back. You know, if you try to take control over it, it will control you. But if you synthesize, yeah, I think that's good. Who in this analogy is the little kid you can shoot in the face in the extended ending and just fuck everything up?
That's such a good question. It's us. It's us. It's the audience. We're the little kid, Jonathan.
Okay, well, anyway, let's go ahead and move on. We will get to all of that. Lots of exciting news to talk about today. But first, Sean, what have you been up to? I've got some stuff. I'm just going to talk about game stuff at the top today because we have some bigger topics for later on in the show. But have you still been playing Sekiro?
Yes, so I've been playing New Game Plus of Sekiro, and I'm almost done. I'm like 3/4 of the way through, which is like something really fascinating about the way the game is designed. Is my first time through was like 30 to 35 hours over the course of spring break. That was like basically most of my free time on spring break was spent playing Sekiro. And then this second time through, again, I'm like about 3/4 of the way through to the ending. I'm basically at the part where, for people who've played the game, you can go off to the side and get an item to access one of the other endings. And there's a specific boss that's kind of a redux version of a boss you fought before that you have to defeat again, and he's harder this time to get an item to get one of the special other endings. So that I'm on that boss, who I did not fight the first time I played it because that was not the ending I went for. So that's where I am, which is very close to the ending of that game. I basically have that boss in a whole other area to go through with like a boss or two there, then a couple like go back through some areas I've been to before but are different now, and then the last boss of the game, and I'm done. So it's like really I could probably beat this game for the second time in about 2 hours, which would probably put my total playtime for New Game Plus at about 8 hours total. I think I've spent 6 hours to get to the point I'm at, which is something that's really amazing about the way the game is designed, is that your first time through, it's so painstaking and every single step is hard fought, and then your second time through, I'm just mowing through motherfuckers, and it's so satisfying. Because you have all of your abilities and equipment and stuff that you have from your first go through. So you kind of, particularly early on, you were definitely more powerful than it feels like the game is kind of designed for at the beginning part. But the enemies do have more health than on the original, like, normal game, and they do more damage. So it's like, as you get probably about, like, a third of the way through New Game Plus, the difficulty kind of catches up to you a little bit. But since I know what the enemies are, I know all the boss patterns, I've beaten all these things before, even if they have more health and they do more damage, I can still beat them reliably. So I've only died, not counting the like 3 or 4 times I've died against this boss that I hadn't fought before because I don't know all his shit yet. All the stuff that I've gone through that I beat the first time, I think I've only died like 2 or 3 times to get up to this point. And there's something extremely satisfying about just blowing through this whole game that I spent like 30 hours to get to where I am now and do the same thing in like the length of a Call of Duty campaign is fucking ridiculous. And I think it's to the credit of how well that game is designed that like I'm not speed running, I'm not like doing hot like sick strats or anything. I'm just playing the game normally. But if you're not dying and you're like beating enemies quickly, you mow your way through that fucking game, and it is incredibly fun.
That's awesome. That really sounds like an old school, side-scrolling kind of game. Like, we were talking about Castlevania Rondo of Blood last week, but take any of the early Castlevanias, Mega Mans, some of the Marios, what have you. There's that skill, climb where it takes a while to go through it the first time, but if you get good at it and go back through, you could tear through those games in like half an hour. And it sounds like Sekiro has that same kind of, which means it's a very intelligent design. Yeah. So that makes me excited. That sounds like if you're going to play Sekiro, you should just do a New Game Plus to like feel that rush.
Yeah, and it's nice because there's other stuff to see that you have probably missed the first time through, and like items that you missed, and then there are really like there are technically 4 endings, but one of the endings is just like a kind of like milquetoast version of 2 of the other endings. That's like, this is just kind of like a basic version of the ending if you didn't do any like extra stuff. So there are really 3 endings to the game, one of which there are 2 bosses associated with that I have not fought because you have to make like a totally different choice earlier in the game to go down that path. So the chances are I will play through it again, at least to get that other ending to fight those 2 bosses, because it would take me, because I'm already past the point that I made that choice. So it would probably take me about 4 hours to get to that ending on another New Game Plus. And yeah, I found it interesting because I've always done this of where when I finished one of the Dark Souls games, with the exception of Dark Souls 2, but with Dark Souls 1, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3, I've always done the thing where I beat it and then immediately start a New Game Plus. But with those games, I play like 2 hours of the New Game Plus, beat the first couple of bosses, and kind of peter out. I think partially because the pace of those games are like naturally much slower, and there's a lot more like fiddling around with menus and upgrade item stuff and like upgrading your stats. And with Sekiro, particularly once you go in New Game Plus and you have almost all that shit done, you're never stopping. It's just I'm constantly moving forward, and that sense of momentum is so ferocious in New Game Plus that it's just pushed me all the way through to this point where like I'm like, it would be dumb not to at least finish this playthrough of New Game Plus, because I'm literally like an hour and a half to 2 hours away from finishing it.
Nice. Yeah, that's how I am definitely going to play Sekiro at some point in the future. Although I will say probably not in April, because this new Dragon Ball game, Sean, it's got my fucking attention. So do you have anything more to say about that? Should we move on?
That's very good. I'll just mention very quickly, because I feel obliged. Today is the 40th anniversary of the Gundam franchise.
Oh,
so
good.
I just want to shout out to Gundam. You're very good. I've been spending some time today. I'm almost done watching through Double Zeta Gundam. So that, like, I'm almost done with, like, the original sort of, like, set of shows that kind of tell a contiguous story. I have to, like, have, like, 5 more episodes of Double Zeta in the Char's Counterattack movie. And I think I'm done with this little, like, fun Gundam rewatch thing I've been doing because this is my favorite stretch of what Gundam is as a franchise. So, shout outs to you, Gundam. You're very good. One day I will get Jonathan to watch you, and we'll talk about you on the podcast properly, because you deserve it.
I agree. You'll have to explain to me, like, the order of the series and which ones to watch and all of that, because sometimes it sounds a little gibberishy, but that's how anime is before you get into it.
You just gotta start with Mobile Suit Gundam, the first show, and you're good. You just start there, and then we're good.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, speaking of anime, like I said, I've been playing Super Dragon Ball Heroes. I'll talk about that in just a second. Brief detours first. I did finish Yoshi's Crafted World this week. I reviewed that in greater depth last week, and I'll just say basically what I said last week. I really like it. It's not, the best platformer you can play on the Nintendo Switch, but it's a damn good one. It's, I think, a very different experience than a Mario game or a Donkey Kong game. It is a Yoshi game, and one that I think is pretty finely... I almost said crafted. That would have been a terrible pun. It is pretty finely honed for, I think, what the Yoshi games do well. It is fucking beautiful and so creative in its visual style and aesthetics, and consistently so all the way through. There's never a point in the game where I got bored with it or felt like this set of levels is dull. There's a couple of frustrating ones in there. No game is perfect, but I really liked it. It's got a good ending. And like with most Nintendo platformers these days, it ends and then it opens up a whole new fucking island for you, and you can go play a bunch of new levels. And I will get to that at some point. But I have a new game to play. Before I get to that, again, because of being back on my Dragon Ball shit with this video game and all the Dragon Ball news that came out this week through Funimation, I did resume my Dragon Ball Z rewatch where I left off at Christmas. Over the Christmas break, I talked about it probably a little bit on the show. I was in the middle of the Boo arc of Dragon Ball Z, and I don't remember exactly why. I think it was just like driving back home from Colorado and then getting back into the swing of things with school. It's like, Dragon Ball's a long series, and I fell off it a little bit. The other reason might have been over Christmas, I got very, very sick, and I was watching a lot of Dragon Ball Z while I was sick, and then it was like associated in my mind. Does that ever happen to you, Sean?
Oh yeah, definitely. I because of that, if I am like actually ill, I try to finish whatever I have been doing when I'm ill, like during that period of convalescence or whatever. Because I definitely have that. That if I'm out of that, then I like associate that feeling with it for the short term. For sure.
So it's been a couple of months, so I'm fine, and I got back into it. And I just like an hour ago, Sean, before we started recording, I was watching the episode of Dragon Ball Z. It's episode 237, and it's the one where Vegeta sacrifices himself to try to destroy Majin Buu. Buu is still a new enemy, and Vegeta blows himself up, and he says goodbye to Trunks and apologizes for never hugging Trunks, and
even you too, Kakarot.
And yes. Sean, that might be the best episode of Dragon Ball Z.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think... Like, Dragon Ball Z is an intensely serialized show. It's very hard to say what are the, like, great episodes and what are the bad ones because of that, because generally it is of the quality it is as it goes along, and then you'll get a Garlic Jr. arc, and that'll be a low point. Or you'll get, like, you know, the Trunks episodes, which are fucking phenomenal, but it's not one episode. It's like, because the Trunks stuff goes over 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple, you know, there's the one where Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2. That's a perfect episode. The one where Goku does the big Kaioken times 4 Kamehameha against Vegeta is about as good as it gets. But the one where Vegeta dies the second time, both of Vegeta's deaths in the show are so fucking good. Vegeta dies the best. And this time he's dying against Majin Buu. And one, just the arc going up to that, like, the Buu arc gets rough at points. The first half of the Buu arc is so fucking good. And Vegeta's arc in that of being this, like, parent, and he's domesticated, and he decides, I'm frustrated with this. I just want to fight Goku. Goku's back. I want to fight this dude. And so he gives himself over to Babidi, and he becomes Majin Vegeta, and he's evil, but he's still resisting it a little bit. And then when Majin Buu is resurrected, he realizes how wrong he was, and he goes to fight with the full awareness that he's probably going to die, and he decides to sacrifice himself. And the way it culminates in that episode, it is a transcendent half hour of television. Like, one of the best pieces of anime you will ever see. Ryo Horikawa has never been better as Vegeta, and he gets to do the entire spectrum of Vegeta in that episode. He gets to do very quiet, introspective Vegeta. Especially, I love his conversation with Piccolo where he asks, if I go to the other world, do I get to see Kakarot again? And Piccolo says, there's no point sugarcoating it. You did some bad shit. The writing is so beautiful. He explains how your body will disappear and you will be transformed into a new spiritual being and go to a different realm. It's a beautiful writing. And Vegeta says, yeah, that's what I thought. And then he goes to Buu and he goes full on, Vegeta yelling, calling everyone a bastard. And then he blows himself up, and the episode ends. The narrator, it's a totally different kind of narration. The narrator does not say anything hinting at what's coming next. It's like the proud Prince of Science, look how he gives his life, or something like that. And then there's no music. It ends on complete silence as the nuclear bomb of Vegeta's body is going off. It's an unbelievably good 20 minutes of Dragon Ball Z, and I've seen it before. I knew that. It's just again, when one of those episodes of any long-running anime that is serialized sticks out as oh, that's one of the superb ones, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of if we did top 10 moments of Dragon Ball Z, that is definitely way up there for sure. Because Vegeta, we talked about it before when we talked about Dragon Ball Super, because how important Vegeta is for that show. But just Vegeta is the character in Dragon Ball where it feels like Toriyama just puts all the character development onto Vegeta, because he's so ripe for it. And I think Toriyama realized very early on in making Dragon Ball Z how interesting a character Vegeta was. And so we spend so much time with him and follow him on this journey from just abject mass murderer to best dad in Dragon Ball Z that's not Piccolo.
Yes. Best biological father in Dragon
exactly.
Ball
Z. Best biological father. He should get that fucking award. That should be on his cup, his mug.
Yes. But yeah, man, it's so good. I just had to shout that out. And the music I opened this episode with is the music where Vegeta is saying goodbye to Trunks, and then the music cuts off they never do this. It just cuts out mid-song when he hits Trunks in the head to knock him out so he'll leave. Oh, it's so good. I had to look up. It's from movie 9. It's from the BoJack movie. It's the music where Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2 in the BoJack movie, and it's one of the best cues. That episode also just has all the best music. It's so good. Anyway, but on a very different end of the Dragon Ball spectrum, I've been playing Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission. This game is on the Nintendo Switch. It is also on PC. It's on Steam, I think.
Yes, it is. I can confirm that, Jonathan, because I own Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission on the PC.
You do? I didn't know you were gonna get it. Have you been playing it?
Yeah, I picked it up last night because I saw you tweet about it. I'm oh shit, that game came out. I should probably spend $60 on this video game. Why not? I bought it on PC. I haven't played a lot of it. I think I'm on chapter 2. I beat fucking Super Saiyan 3 Scouter Vegeta or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
today.
very early in the story and have been mostly just kind of playing around and figuring out how all the systems work, because it's a fairly complicated game, and there's a lot of the tutorials in the game are very detailed, but you need to just okay, you can make cards, and you can there's a lot of shit in this game.
There is. I mean, that was one of my first reactions, is this is a crazy content-rich game, because you have a full campaign, which is what you're talking about. I'm a little further than you, but actually not a ton, because I've been playing all the other modes. There's a full arcade mode, which is all the campaigns from the physical arcade cabinets in Japan. There are 20 arcade campaigns in the game. That's crazy. You have all the online stuff. You have all the card shopping. You have a full card creator mode where you can custom make cards. I spent like an hour and a half playing with that today, Sean. It is so crazy in-depth and awesome. You've got you can create new missions. It's kind of an endless amount of content. But we should probably back up and explain what Dragon Ball Heroes is, because it is one of the weirder corners of the Dragon Ball media empire, but also one of the absolute most successful. In Japan, Dragon Ball Heroes is a full-blown phenomenon. Like, for a while, it was bigger than anything else in the Dragon Ball media empire. Super kind of, I think, came back and was, like, on top. But, like, it started in 2010 in Japan. It's an arcade game where you buy physical cards, like trading cards, and you create decks of 7 characters, and in Japan, you go into the arcade, and there's a big, like, touchscreen interface, and you put your cards down, and they, come to life in the game, and you do these card battles. It's not a card battler in the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering is. It's much more action-oriented. It's a little shorter in terms of how matches go. Very flashy. It's got some quick-time events. There's all these things where you have to rub the cards around on screen in different shapes, and that's awesome. And in here, you do it on the touch screen or with your controller or mouse or what have you if you're on PC. And yeah, it is a big phenomenon in Japan. In the arcade, of course, you have to have the physical cards. In the game, all the cards are there, and you have to unlock them, but you don't have to buy your own physical cards. There's no microtransactions or anything like that. And like I said, it's been going forever. So it's been going almost a decade now, since 2010. Literally 10 years this year, and there was Dragon Ball Heroes up until 2016. Then they did a major iteration. It became Super Dragon Ball Heroes, just like the next step of the game. And this is the first video game of that. There were 3 video games of Dragon Ball Heroes on the Nintendo 3DS, but those never got localized. The arcade cabinets obviously never came over here because we don't have arcades really in the United States the same way they do in Japan. And this is the first time Super Dragon Ball Heroes or Dragon Ball Heroes has been made available in English. Although I will say, the game is in English asterisk with, just be aware if you're going to buy the game, the text is in English. All the voices are in Japanese, which is not unusual, but there is a significant amount of voiced content that probably should be subtitled and is not. So I would recommend, be comfortable listening to Japanese.
It didn't even occur to me that that's right. None of the voice, other than there's, occasionally, voice dialogue in, the story cutscene kind of stuff, and that has, subtitles because it has kind of the visual novel presentation with a big text box at the bottom, but any of the stuff in the fights or anything like that, and I think there was even straight up a short sort of tutorial-y bit on how you get super Dragon Balls, which is a whole thing that can happen in a fight if you satisfy specific conditions, that I'm pretty sure just happened through a totally non-subtitled exchange that Trunks gives you. I think it technically is Great Saiyaman 3, I don't know, but yeah. It's Trunks, but yeah, the Trunks gives you, and yeah, so there is definitely, as you say, there's a lot of non-subtitled stuff, which is understandable because there has got to be just even though most characters do not have much dialogue for an individual character, there are so many fucking characters in this game that just through sheer bulk of each character having half a dozen lines of dialogue or something associated with them, there's a lot of fucking audio in this game.
Yes. So, I would say the localization is a little half-assed in that regard. I would not expect them to subtitle all that dialogue, but there are certainly some lines that should obviously be subtitled. So just be aware of that if you're buying it, especially if you're buying it, I don't know, for kids who would be confused by that. But yeah, I've got to say, Sean, the reason I bought this is because I've been watching from afar. I've never been to Japan. Mm-hmm. Dragon Ball Heroes being a fucking sensation. It's got manga adaptations. It's got an online anime. It's got all this shit. I have all these Dragon Ball Heroes cards from times I've bought books and stuff from Japan, and I've never been able to play it. I didn't even know what the game was. I had to have this. I didn't know if I would like it or not. I didn't even buy it to like it or not. I bought it because I needed to know. I kind of love it. I kind of fucking love it, Sean.
I'm still mixed on it a little bit, for a couple of reasons. Like, one of the major ones being, like, it's hard not to feel like when I'm playing it, that I'm missing out on what is, like, a significant part of, like, the authentic experience by not having the arcade machine and the physical cards, because, like, it's okay to, like, you know, drag, because I have, like, a Goten and a Trunks that I have in my team, and they can fuse to make Gotenks, as one would expect. And to do that, when you have to satisfy a specific condition, which in this case is just, I think it's just when it starts at the beginning of round 2, it just kind of triggers. And then you drag the 2 cards to the bottom of the game screen, because you kind of have these like 4 horizontal lanes, and the bottom of which is this kind of standby zone that you can bring cards down to either recharge them or to like do special shit with them. So you bring them down to like the stamina rechargey lane, and then put them into the opposite corners, and then slide them together. And that's like okay to do either with like, sometimes I'll use the arrow keys, or I'll click with my mouse and drag them down depending on what hand I'm playing with at that point. Because this is a very good one-handed video game. It's just like you have something else you're doing. If you're texting someone, you have like a sandwich. Like, this is a game, at least on the PC, very easy to control in multiple configurations with just one hand, which I enjoy. But you know, just dragging those things around on the screen is like, you can understand, you know, obviously this is the way that it was programmed, and there's lots of stuff where you can see, oh, this, like, they have not like translated this to try to be like make more sense on like a PC or presumably on Switch. Instead, they just kind of taken whatever the mechanic was that worked on the touchscreen with the physical cards, and made it so like you just have to move the cards around manually through your like video game interface. And I can imagine it being very fucking awesome to have like 2 really nice like holographic Goten and Trunks cards, and you grab both of them and bring them down to the bottom of like your touchscreen, then slide them together, and then they fuse together on the screen. That sounds rad as shit. It doesn't have a huge amount of impact. Like, it's a kind of novel and fun, like, the first time I did it, but now that, like, every single time I'm playing around, like, and I've only had them in my team for, like, 3 or 4 battles, but every single battle I hit round 2 and I have to do that thing, it's just kind of a little bit dull, and it's, I don't think is a problem. It's like, it's an understandable problem for the game to have, but it is frustrating to be like, fuck, like, I think I would really love this if I had the physical cards, and I had the physical component of it seems so cool, and being able to see like through this like you know, shady window of what this like the real game probably is like, and having like I just have to kind of drag this cursor around on the screen a little bit to charge this thing up, as opposed to grabbing the actual physical card on the table and shaking it around like a madman to make it like charge up its energy blast. That sounds fucking awesome. Doing it on a screen is just not as fun.
Totally, and I get that, and I think everyone's mileage will vary on this a little bit because of that. You know, this game, the first thing you will realize about it, launching it up, is it is arcade as fuck. Mm-hmm. This is an arcade game. It makes no bones about it. We do not have games like this in the West anymore. It's been a very long time since we regularly did, and the game has not been significantly adapted to become a console game. It is still the arcade game, and this is, like, the point of it is clearly, here is all the content so you can have fun with it outside the arcade, but not to try to create a big new experience. And I think that makes sense if you're thinking about this as a game primarily aimed at Japan, where you would go have fun with this at home, but you could also, on a Saturday, go just play it at your local arcade, right? It would not feel as much of a gap. Here, you and I do not have that option, Sean. We would have to fly to the island nation of Japan to play this card game, which would be a terrible use of money, going to Japan just to play Dragon Ball Heroes.
So we should just, like, fucking, like, mail Thomas all of our, like, different Dragon Ball Heroes cards we've gotten from bullshit, and just, like, tell him to, like, just shoot a video of him playing it with our cards so we could, like, live vicariously through that video of, like, I gotta see the Vegito, like, the Goku, Super Saiyan Vegeta I got fucking, like, 5 years ago or whatever when I picked up imported the manga. It's like, I want to see them fuse it to Vegito. I just want the cards to slide together and then infused on screen. That seems really cool.
I know. He does live apparently within walking distance of an arcade. He has not been there yet. I would be very surprised if there is not a Dragon Ball Heroes cabinet in there. Yeah. Like, I don't know what that's got to be in every arcade in Japan at this point, right?
Seems like
it's such a sensation. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you get that it's very arcadey. I think, as you're saying, Sean, you also get right away why it must be fun in Japan to just have your cards, and especially like if you're going to the arcade with your friends, you could probably play together, and you could also have people around you, and it's probably a fun spectator thing to do because it is so flashy. But I will say I am impressed at how much the game itself that they released does try to bulk up with enough stuff to do with the card battler that it doesn't feel overly thin to me. Like having a story mode that is a lot of fun to me, at least. I enjoy it so much more than Dragon Ball FighterZ or when I played it Xenoverse. I think the writing is very snappy. You can go through it very quickly. They create fun. You can do a lot of stuff to create fun battle conditions, which you can't really do with a fighting game. So I think they do cool things with that. The arcade mode. Have you gone into arcade mode yet, Sean?
No, I've only done some of the story stuff, and then like a little bit of like just building decks.
It's so good. The arcade mode has all these like what if campaigns, and they're very light on story, but some of the story is fucking hilarious. I tweeted out a picture of one of them where it's all the Dragon Ball characters working at a business in town and getting like HR training, and it made me laugh my ass off. And then they create...
Yeah, so that's the tweet that I saw that was like, oh shit, that game came out, I should probably play this game. And I had been operating on the assumption that that was something that happened later in the story mode or something. Nope. I did not realize... because I just haven't even gone into the arcade menu because so on the PC, I don't know what it is on Switch, but on the PC, if you press the Z key when you're just on like the map, it will just bring up this like list of menus you can access. That is, so it's like there are like 10 fucking different menus. It's just like, here's your, like they had to make a menu for the menus in the game, and all of those menus have a bunch of menus in them. But so it's like you press the Z key, it's like, oh, here's story mode, and here's the arcade mode, and here's the card builder, and here's the fucking deck builder, and here's the shop, and here's the other shop, and here's the other shop, and here's the like multiplayer space, and here's like the other multiplayer. Like I don't even know what half of them are yet because there's so many menus. I haven't got into half of them.
On Switch, you just hit start.
Okay.
I guess we don't say start and select anymore. It's plus, but it's start, and it comes. And I honestly love that menu's there. It makes the game very user friendly. I mean, that's the thing. This game has a ton of content. I think this specific card game is really well suited to doing a lot of fun condition-based battles, and they can make it harder and easier in various different ways. The arcade matches have a bunch of cool stuff in them. And so it's very feature-rich. Again, this is like a decade of video game they've put into this thing, and it's very polished. It's very user-friendly, I think, for the amount of stuff in it. Like, there's a lot to learn, but I have not ever been actively confused. It does not necessarily feel daunting. I was worried because this is like the 5th Dragon Ball Heroes game. There might not be a lot of tutorial. There's plenty of tutorial. You don't have to worry about that. And you can get to all that stuff very easily. Like, just press start or Z on the computer, and the menu comes up. What do you want to do? Here it all is. I was very impressed by that. So, like, I think if it were just, a series of matches in the arcade mode on its own, this would feel like a novelty, but not worth $60, and it would be kind of like, oh, I wish I had the actual arcade cabinet, and you'd go home sad. I'm having fun with it because it supports all that, I think, with some pretty robust mechanics around it. So far, I still feel like I'm getting my head around it, and I've probably put 5 or 6 hours in this weekend, and I'm loving it because also you just get cards at such a fast clip. Like, they don't hold back and like make you super grind for it. Like, every match you're going to get a couple of gacha tickets, so you can go to the gacha machine and get your cards. And all the cards are kind of fun and exciting to use. And so basically you get enough cards that with every match you could build a new deck if you want. And you can always try out new things. And there's a lot of combinations. There's over 1,000 cards in the game. You can create new cards, which that whole mechanic I'm fucking loving. It's insane. And there's some cool stuff you can do with that. Like, I used card creation and built a team with Jackie Chun, young Krillin, and young Goku. Goku turns into a great ape every round 2, and I put them there on a team, and then I put in some other like early Dragon Ball characters that I had cards of, and that's just a fun thing to do. And then the matches themselves are very flashy, and it's not the most strategic card game I've ever played, but I think there's a surprising amount of depth to it. It's definitely held my attention. Every game is kind of like this 10-minute fucking whiplash where afterwards you kind of have to take a breath because it's so fast-paced. And, definitely I've felt that a little bit of the arcade envy, but I will say Switch does have, if you play it handheld, you can do all of the motions on the touch screen, so you can actually like rub your physical cards back and forth and things like that, which is not as good as the real thing, but it's like a step closer, so that's a little bit better than doing it.
But on this, if I remember correctly, doesn't the Switch touchscreen can't do two presses at the same time?
That's true. So you probably do one and then the other.
Yeah, you can't do the fusion thing, because that's by far like the coolest. That's the card. Like, if I was in Japan and I was playing Dragon Ball Heroes, I would have a deck of only fusion people, because that is the coolest fucking thing. I love the idea of you dragging the cards down and then throwing them together and them fusing is very cool.
Well, and like the animations that come out of that are always so much fun. Like, the game is graphically pretty low res, but I think the animations are consistently really cool and goofy and fun. So I do wish I could do the physically tap them together. Switch is probably as good as you're gonna get on in terms of getting there, because I assume the 3DS did the same thing, but the 3DS also is not a multi-touch screen, so, and it's also smaller, so that wouldn't work anyway. But it's like a step better. But I will say I think the controls work with the controller just fine. Like, I never have had trouble activating one of the actions, and that could have been a worry, and they did iron that out enough on a normal, just physical controller, for me at least.
Yeah, like, I have been finding, like, the actual card battles to be fine, but, like, I worry that my patience with them is going to wear thin, because they are very, very samey, and like, I don't find them quite snappy enough. Like there's no... Unless maybe this is there and I just haven't seen it in a menu or something, but like, I want like just like speed this animation up, because I think it'd be the thing of where when I built a new deck of like 7 characters, I would want to see all the animations, but after like 2 battles, like, I just speed it up, because also like most of the only special animations for characters are related to any specific unique feature of like a transformation or a fusion or something, and then whatever their ultimate like special attack is. Those, like, everything else is just like kind of generic key blast, like a couple of punches. Like, I feel like I've seen all the combinations of those like normal animations already a couple dozen times. So like that kind of stuff, I feel like if you were in the arcade machine, the like the novelty of the whole like physical contraption like makes that stuff not a big deal. Like, on like playing it as a normal game of where I'm just going match to match to match to match, like that stuff I found a little bit tedious. But it does, like, for me, like, the game is not really about that. It is more like what I talked about with Gundam Breaker 3 in like 2016, which is that these games are not about whatever the combat thing is. Like, the combat just has to be serviceable enough to create some sort of excuse for you to collect and manipulate all these different things. So in Gundam Breaker 3, it was about building up whatever your Gundam model was, and the fighting was just so you could see all the special moves and like fire the fucking 50 rocket launchers you put on this ridiculous thing. And here in Super Dragon Ball Heroes, it is about just like, I want to put together this dumb team of different characters that have these different special moves and see them happen, and then the next match do a different combination of different characters. And specifically, the most fun I've been having with this game is I just like to use all the ridiculous fucking characters that I don't know what the fuck they are. Because this is why I wanted to play Dragon Ball Heroes, was because I knew there was all this shit in this game that's like either like characters from weird what if scenarios, like what if Vegeta from the Saiyan saga could go Super Saiyan 3 for whatever. The character who Vegeta has never gone Super Saiyan 3 in the canon, let alone weird past Vegeta going like not Super Saiyan 1, not Super Saiyan 2. They immediately jump to Super Saiyan 3 as like to like put their foot down as like, no, this game's just going to do whatever the fuck it wants with Dragon Ball stuff. So like, just I like seeing all the weird other fusions and like Goku, Zeno, and all like the weird like alternate universe versions of characters they put together and stuff like that, and all like the stuff that if you played the Xenoverse games, you are like mildly exposed to the whole like Time Patroller, all that stuff, and like Mirai and Toa. But there's a whole universe of those kinds of characters in Super Dragon Ball Heroes that you have no idea exist if you're just playing. If you're doing anything else in Dragon Ball, you have no idea that there's this whole universe of other weird alternate characters that exist like only in this game.
I agree. Like, I think, I might like the arcade battle section more than you do, but I think no matter what, your mileage is going to vary on that. It's going to be a very acquired taste. The cards and just collecting everything, I totally agree. If you have affection for Dragon Ball, you will get a kick out of that, especially, I think, if you're a long-term enough fan to get lots of the references, but also, like, miss some of the references, because it is kind of joyful for, I think, someone like you or I, Sean, to be as into Dragon Ball as we are, and then play a game like this where we'll see something like, I think I have one called like Gojenks or something, like it's Vajenks, I think is what it is, and it's Vegeta and someone else from Xeno something, and I'm like, I have no idea who the fuck that is, and I love that there's like, I didn't know who this Dragon Ball character was, or sometimes like it'll be a movie henchman and I have to think for a second, like, what's he? Oh, right, it's that guy. I love that guy in the specific dose of a card game, because, if they suddenly started putting in, like, Super Saiyan 4 fused Gogeta from Dragon Ball GT into Dragon Ball Fighters, I might scratch my head a little bit and be like, that's the Gogeta you're doing? Because they can only create so many distinct fighters in a game like that. But in Dragon Ball Heroes, go for broke. You can make as many cards as you fucking want, and they even give you the option to make more cards if you just want to go make your own shit. So everybody is here at this party. Every possible thought you have had of a Dragon Ball character, they're in here somewhere. I bet the rabbit from early Dragon Ball is in there somewhere in the game, Sean.
He's got to
Boss
be.
Rabbit. He's got to be.
If at least is like a weird sticker or something you could
Yes.
put in a custom card, he has to be in the, because you tweeted at me today that fucking Bio Broly. This has got to be the only Dragon Ball video game that features Bio Broly in any way, shape, or form.
I was kicking myself, Sean, because I was going through the shop where you buy stuff to create cards, and I had bought a bunch of stuff, and then I saw Bio Broly there, and he was more than the money I had, but if I hadn't bought stuff, I could have gotten him, and I wish I could have got him because he's a sticker, but he's a sticker for a Create-A-Card, which means that he will be a 3D model in the game if I put him in there. Mm-hmm. So Bio Broly is in a video game, Sean. We thought it was never going to happen, for good reason.
And not only is he in the game, since he is like a Create-A-Card character, which I assume just every character in the game presumably is, that means you could just make him do the fucking Wolfang Fist if you want. Like, you could just do that.
Yep.
Like, there's no barrier of entry to, like, you can just make him do literally any, like, special attack in the history of Dragon Ball, or even, like, hundreds that don't. Like, so the one that the Vegeta, like, whatever, it's Vegeta, it's Vegeta and Trunks. Which is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Because I have that also. He's my favorite character I have that's not my Fusion Gotenks. And he has, his special move is Burning Impact, which is burning attack combined with, I think the video games call it like Final Impact, but it's the thing that Vegeta does, that like the dirty fireworks move and blows the fucker up. Like, it's that attack, and so he does the burning attack like hand sign thing, but instead of like firing a blast, he like points his two fingers and the guy explodes. It's like, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous, like, what a weird combination of moves to put together for. It's not like burning Gallic gun. It's not what it's no, this is it. It's not like Final Flash, like sword slash or something. It's nope. It's, you're taking burning attack and the weird thing he does to blow the fucker up in Dragon Ball Z. That's what you're doing? All right, game. All right, that's the level we're on.
I love it. It's also got all of the GT stuff, which, like, GT has been very notably left out of a lot of recent video games. And I forgot how much, like, even if I'm very lukewarm to negative on the series itself, there's a lot of art from GT I like. And GT is at its best in this kind of setting, where it's just a ridiculous character on a card. The game really does feel like you've been given this awesome toy box to just put a bunch of weird shit together. And then, yes, the arcade battler is mainly an excuse to see it all come to life and have fun with it. And, on that level, I smile all the time playing this game. I can really feel myself maybe losing myself in this, because there is just, again, like, a decade's worth of content. Like, most video games do not come out after being worked on for, essentially like 10 years, which is what this is, because they've been slowly iterating on it for that entire time. And so everything they want to put in it is in here at this point. It's fucking ridiculous. It'll be an acquired taste, but it is, I will say, it is to my palate. It is my kind of Dragon Ball bullshit so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to become my podcast game for the foreseeable future. Like that's really feels like a game that's good for that sort of thing.
By that you mean listening to podcasts?
Yes. No, I'm playing it right now. I'm hitting the fucking QuickTime thing that you have to do every single time to get the advantage and beat the enemy. No, so like listening to podcasts and just grinding out a bunch of cards and doing dumb shit because you don't like. You don't need to listen to most of the audio. Like, that's not a thing that's particularly important past, like, you understanding, like, the first hour or so of you kind of figuring out what the game is. So, yeah, it is definitely, like, if there is any video game that is something that, like, only for fans of the property, this is that video game, right?
Yes.
So this is definitely not a, like, it's not Dragon Ball FighterZ, where it's, like, if you enjoy fighting games, you will probably fucking really love Dragon Ball FighterZ. That is not Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Like, if you're a big fan of Magic the Gathering or, like, Hearthstone, do not pick up Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Only if you like Dragon Ball bullshit, only then can you enter. Like, only then is this game, like, I think accessible to you in any way, shape, and form.
Yes. I also do want to say the writing in the game of what I've seen so far is pretty good. There have been a lot of moments in story mode and arcade mode that have made me laugh out loud. The last time a Dragon Ball game did that was probably Fusions on the 3DS. This is very much in line with the writing in Fusions, if you liked that game, which is a great Dragon Ball game. I'm enjoying it on a similar level. Again, the arcade mission where everyone's doing HR training, mwah, chef's kiss. It's so beautiful. And then the fights were actually pretty cool as well, because you fight Vegeta in a business suit. And it's great.
Very good. I do have to say, since I haven't really played the arcade mode stuff, although now I have to jump into that now that I kind of understand what it is. Because I think the main reason why I didn't jump into it, because I thought that maybe like I would not be leveled up enough or whatever, or have enough cards to be able to do it, and assumed I had to play more story modes. So it's nice to know that I can just jump into that. Before like the story mode, I do enjoy this, like, the absurd premise of, like, it's just like people living in like a weird future, like near future Tokyo or some shit, where Dragon Ball Heroes exists as like the actual physical card game, and everybody plays it, and it's like Yu-Gi-Oh style. Like, it seems like it's the most important thing. Like, the entire economy of Japan is just based around this card game that kids play in arcade machines. And then all of a sudden, like, actual cooler just manifests in the real world. And there's some hint of, like, there's some Time Patroller bullshit that's going on, because there's, like, a whole opening animated cutscene with Time Patroller Trunks in the Supreme Kai of Time, if you play the Xenoverse games. So I'm assuming at some point they will reveal that, like, this is all some time alternate universe bullshit, that this is not just a game, that things are actually crossing over. But you then eventually teleport into the world of Dragon Ball Z, and I just love your character and the girl. Just like every time they encounter something, like, oh my god, that's Vegeta! Like, that's and I just love, like, the first time they're like, oh, we're gonna have you teleport inside the game, and their first reaction is, does that mean we get to meet Goku? And it's like the most real fucking writing for something like that. There's no, like, angst to it at all.
Nope.
It's just immediately like, oh my god, like, I want to go hug Goku. Like, fuck yeah, I do. Like, this is how I would react if I was 10 years old. This is how I would react now. Like, what I was saying. If you just, like, let me dive into it like a perfect virtual recreation of the universe of Dragon Ball, I would go up and be like, holy shit, that's Vegeta. He's kind of scary, but oh my god, will you sign my shit, Vegeta? That would be pretty dope.
Absolutely. Have you met the character Froze yet?
No, I have not.
Okay, there's a character you're going to meet soon who is another kid who joins them, and his favorite character is Frieza. And
oh, great!
It's so good. It's so good.
That sounds good.
And there's a promise of, like, more to come. And I can't wait to meet, like, all the kids who are obsessed with different corners of the Dragon Ball universe. I want there to be a kid who's just like, Garlic Jr.'s my shit. I love all the Spice named villains. Garlic Jr., all those guys.
I want to meet the Broly guy. I want to meet the guy, but he's like so hard. He's like, no, like, I'm not that Dragon Ball Super Broly bullshit. No, fuck that. Real Broly, like, I'm the devil. Like, that's my game. And he's like just sitting there fucking listening to fucking heavy metal.
Yes,
that's what I want. I want to meet that dude, and I want to kick his ass.
That would be fun. All right. Anything else to say about this very silly video game before we move on?
I look forward to seeing what other crazy fucking bullshit, because I have like 5 different versions of the devil dude that they fight in the fortune teller Baba tournament, and it's not that guy. It's other devils like him. I have one of him, and then they made other versions of devils that look like that dude. And it's like, so again, that's the level we're talking about. This is not like they put fucking, Bojack in, like, Budokai Tenkaichi 3, and that's, like, like, Hildegard, and like, that's the most obscure they go. Here, it's like, we made different versions of the dude that appears in, like, 2 chapters of Dragon Ball, and that's it. Yes, like, I'm betting I'm gonna run into, like, the fucking weird, like, blob monster that lives in the fucking tower in the Ice Kingdom. Like, that's the level of, like, obscure, made-up bullshit they're going for in this game.
I was going through the stickers for card creation, and they have every movie villain and their entire roster of henchmen,
Yeah, they don't stop at, like, Sauser from Cooler, who's, like, the dude with, like, the cool, like, sword hand. It's, like, which, again, that's, like, the most obscure most Dragon Ball games go to is, like, to that level. They'll pick, like, the most notable henchman from one of the movies. You're right. They go to all of them. I bet they have, like, the weird knockoff Cybermen from the fucking World's Strongest movie. Like, those have got to be in this game.
Probably, yeah. I'm excited to play more. All right, Sean, you want to go ahead, get to the news, and talk about a game no one's excited to play more of?
Yeah, oh god. What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Let's start with, I think, the biggest video game news this week was a report in Kotaku by Jason Schreier. Who else? Of course it's Jason Schreier. He is the investigative reporter for this kind of thing. I will say Kotaku did a lot of good work this week. The day after this, they also had a report by Cecilia de Anastasio, I think is how you say her last name, about all the sexual predation in the Pokemon Twitch community, which I didn't put on the outline because I'm not sure what to say about it that goes beyond that story, because it is just sad and awful. And if you are a parent, just please be mindful of who your kids watch online. It's bad. So everyone at Kotaku, we talk about Jason Schreier because I think he breaks the kind of news we talk about, but they have a great team over there. But once again, Jason Schreier delivered a bombshell report, this time on, I think what everyone was waiting for is, what the hell happened with Anthem? Why is it so bad? Why is it so clearly unfinished? And what's going on with Bioware? Because we love Bioware and we're worried about them.
Yeah.
It's like we're their parent, and they've been on spring break for a really long time, and they're not coming home. And after reading this story, Sean, I don't think they're ever coming home.
It's concerning, for sure. But like I said at the top of the podcast, there's like this weird sense of, like, did I load up the wrong essay and I just, like, keep on putting Anthem? Because it's like there's so many beats that if you've read particularly his Blood, Sweat, and Pixels book, which I highly recommend. We talked about it on the podcast back when it came out. And it has a lot of different reports like this. But, like, all the ones that are about AAA studios and how they went wrong, whether it's Destiny or Diablo 3 or Dragon Age Inquisition or what have you, they all hit all these beats that are so fucking familiar, and it's infuriating. Like, down to just, like, Frostbite is obviously a huge one for all the Bioware ones, that literally every single Bioware game that has come out this generation, which is Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Anthem, have been handicapped in some massive, significant way by the sort of demand or whatever, the expectation for them to build their games on Frostbite, which is EA's proprietary engine developed by DICE, the developers of the Battlefield games and Battlefront and Mirror's Edge, like that studio. And it seems like Frostbite is a very good engine if you are DICE, because it's made to make the games that DICE makes, which are all first-person shooters. And Bioware does not make first-person shooters. This happens to be a third-person shooter, but they make, like, big open-world RPG kinds of games, and so them being forced to build their games on Frostbite has just destroyed them again. Like, it's three games games in a row. That it's like the exact same fucking thing.
It is, but I think the thing is, Sean, for me, of why I said it's so much worse than I imagined, is because, it happens once, that's bad. It happens twice, that's really bad. It happens 3 times, and you're like, not only is it happening over and over again, but they can't stop it. And it's also very clear it's worse every time. Like, Dragon Age Inquisition had problems, but was an acclaimed video game that people loved. You and I we didn't love it as much, but it's a good game. We'd recommend it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
You know?
I mean, it's easily the best of those 3 games. Of the games they've made this generation, Dragon Age Inquisition is in a whole different fucking class from
Dragon Age
Andromeda
Inquisition.
and Anthem.
Yeah, Inquisition is a game from this generation you should own. If you have a PS4 or Xbox One, I think it's required playing. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
But then you have Mass Effect Andromeda, which was a train wreck. Then you have Anthem, which is worse than a train wreck, whatever that is. But it's like it's not even really a game. Like Mass Effect Andromeda is a game, whatever its faults are. Anthem, I don't know what the fuck it is, but it's not a game. Like, you know what I mean? Like it didn't come out. It's not even that it's not fully baked. I don't know if it made it into the oven. And you read this story, and it's even worse than Andromeda and some of these others because this game's development. There's stuff in here like, so they announced the game at E3 2017 and they showed that really cool 5-minute demo thing. The game had not entered production yet. Like the phase where you are actively producing the game, it was still considered in pre-production. Like here's a quote. At E3 2017, Bioware announced Anthem would launch fall 2018. Behind the scenes, however, they had barely even implemented a single mission. I don't know how accurate this is, said one Bioware developer, but it felt like the entire game was built in the last 6 to 9 months. You couldn't play it. There was nothing there. It was just this crazy final rush. The hard part is, how do you make a decision when there's no game? There's nothing to play. So yeah, you're going to keep questioning yourself. And then there's all the stuff about stress casualties. I cannot count the amount of stress casualties we had on Mass Effect Andromeda or Anthem, said a third former Bioware developer in an email. A stress casualty at Bioware means someone had such a mental breakdown from the stress, they're just gone for 1 to 3 months. Some come back, some don't. You learn throughout this story that they have had incredible brain drain, just so many talented developers fleeing this studio. Nobody had a positive picture to paint. You learn that Dragon Age 4, which apparently was pretty cool. It was coming along well under the direction of Mark Laidlaw, who is the Dragon Age guy. It got just sacrificed on the altar for Anthem. It wasn't because the game wasn't working. It wasn't because it wasn't coming together. It's because that team was getting bigger. They had to have all hands on deck for Anthem, so they shut that fucking game down. They lost Mark Laidlaw, who has to be one of their most important assets as a studio, and now there's no Dragon Age 4. I mean, someone's working on something, but who knows what that's going to be. One of the most damning details to me is there's a part where you learn that they brought in the team from BioWare Austin, which is the team that did The Old Republic, Star Wars. That is the only people in all of BioWare who have ever made an online game. And they just ignored the BioWare Austin people when they said, hey, look at all these things your online game doesn't have and therefore will not work at launch. And then when it didn't work at launch, all the BioWare Austin people are like, we tried telling them for a year. So, like, it's catastrophic. It's like all the problems on Inquisition snowballed and got exponentially worse for Andromeda. And then they snowballed and got exponentially worse again for Anthem. I don't know how you save this studio. It's tragic that they went from Mass Effect 3 in 2012. It's only been 7 years. It's been 7 years since Mass Effect 3, and it's a dead company walking. That's tragic.
Yeah, and like one of the things to note about that, like it's been 7 years since Mass Effect 3, is that is when Anthem entered pre-production, and we've kind of had known that was more or less the case for a long time because they had shown like little like teases of what the big next BioWare thing was going to be at a couple of early this generation EA press conferences in the long line of every single EA press conference for this entire generation, where EA has never had anything to fucking show at any E3 press conference, so they've only ever shown half-finished bullshit. And one of those early ones, I think from like E3 2014 or 2015, was like a couple of screenshots from what was known as Project Dylan, named after Bob Dylan, because they wanted this to be something that people remembered and talked about, like the people still talk about Bob Dylan's music. Which one, like, every time they referred to that, it made it seem like they thought that Bob Dylan was dead.
I know.
Like, Bob Dylan's not dead. He's still alive. He's still making music, guys.
Yes. He has released new albums, not just this decade, but within the last 2 years.
Yeah, like, every time that has come up, I've thought one was, like, the stupidest, dorkiest fucking thing you could possibly do for, like, how you name your project. And the two, it's like, guys, Bob Dylan's still, like, it feels like they were betting that he would, like, die during the production of this game, which, given, like, how long it took for the game to come out, is, like, it was possible. You know, it came through, it was in development during, like, this, like, period of, like, significant celebrity deaths we've had over the past couple of years, but fucking, the Project Dylan stuff is fucking stupid. But so it started pre-production basically 7 years ago, but it's that classic story we see of particularly modern AAA video game development, which is this thing of where people are, like, it's the exact same thing that happened on Destiny. If you read Schreier's report about Destiny 1, which is that, like, people were, like, you know, siloed off in different teams and prototyping different ideas, and the people at the top that were, like, in the supervising and, like, production and, like, producer capacity on the project wouldn't make any hard and fast decisions about the identity of the game, and, like, would not make deadlines about when stuff needed to be done by, and just couldn't commit to a specific direction for anything. And so they just prototyped this game to hell for, like, 5 to 6 years, basically. And so then they end up in this scenario where they have thought up a lot of different ideas about what this video game could be. It wasn't even called Anthem. That's the fucking best part about the whole story is right at the beginning when he talks about how it was originally called Beyond. It had been called Beyond as, like, what was supposed to be his actual name, not just like Project Dylan, but his actual video game name as Beyond Forever. And then EA comes in, like, at the last second before the debut at E3 and says, like, actually, like, Beyond is very difficult to get, like, any IP rights because it's a very broad generic. I mean, it would have been a bad name for the game anyways. But it's like, it was something they couldn't fucking get a trademark on. So it's like, okay, Anthem. And if you think that meant, oh, well, that must have been like what it was in the story of the game where it's the anthem of creation and all that stuff. No, because they hadn't even come up with that, like, whole concept yet. So I'm not even entirely sure how or why they came up with the idea Anthem, because it seemed like they hadn't even written the story to the point where the anthem of creation was even a thing. They justified the name after the fact by making that shit.
That would be like if in Destiny, The Taken King or whatever, the first time they tried to do a really big Destiny story, they tried to work the word Destiny in, like, we have to get the Matrix of Destiny. And that's how it's called Destiny.
It's just, oh my god. So it's like, so that just, like, is such a good insight into how sort of, like, haphazard, like, very basic fundamental things were throughout more or less the entire development of Anthem. And so you end up in this scenario where a game has been technically in development for, like, 7 years. God knows how much money Bioware and EA spent, you know, on the development of this game in that period of time. And then only to come out the other end with a game that was made in the, like, actual, like, full-on production in the span of, like, a year or a year and a half. And it's absurd. And it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's kind of amazing that Anthem is as good of a game as it is. That, like, you know, the combat based on playing that beta was, like, fine. You know, like, I didn't enjoy it, but it was also not, like, made to my taste. And so it's like, I know that there are lots of people that are having a good time with Anthem despite its flaws, and it's, like, impressive that the game could come together enough to even be in that kind of state, because if you listen to the episode that we recorded when I talked about me playing those Devil May Cry games, like, this game had, like, almost the same fucking production, like, history as Devil May Cry 2, which was a game that was more or less made in the course of, like, 6 months, but that game was made in 6 months in, like, 2003. Not 2019. Like, the scope of what, like, needs to happen to make a AAA video game today is so different from when, like, this kind of thing would happen on something like a Devil May Cry 2 or Halo 2. That also had, if you've seen the documentaries for that game, a very similar kind of development where they came out at E3 with a demo that was not indicative of anything that was actually made for the game yet. But you couldn't put together a game in about 2 years in 2002 to come out 2004. You can't do that in 2019, and it shows based on how Anthem came out.
The part of the story where Casey Hudson has come back, they've promoted someone within, and I forget his name, as, like, the new director to just make decisions, and it's the last year, and they finally have people on board who are willing to, like, make decisions and say, we're going this direction, forget about that, and they are just every day cutting things. They are just cutting and slashing and burning and saying, The goal is to get the game out. It's not to make it good. It's not to implement our artistic vision. It's to fucking finish it enough that we can press discs. Like, it is so sad because, you know, I don't want to, the report does not make fun of the developers or anything like that. These are, you know, people working as hard and passionately as they can under horrific circumstances. And it is just, you feel like reading that you're on the deck of the fucking Titanic. Like they are, you know, fiddling away, trying to make everyone calm down as the ship is sinking. And they all, that's the hardest thing to read, is that last year, they all knew what it was going to be. And they had to work every day, including Saturdays and Sundays, you know, and give their lives up just to get something out the door. It's fucking tragic. And I have to ask the question that I asked when Mass Effect Andromeda came out, and when Amy Hennig's Star Wars game was shut down and Visceral collapsed under EA. Didn't collapse, it was shuttered under EA. I've asked this before, and I will ask it now. How much money is EA willing to lose on the notion that they might save money using Frostbite? Mm-hmm. How many games are they willing to sell down the river and put in the bargain bin of history 3 months after release so that they can save the relatively minor licensing fee of buying Unreal Engine like every other fucking developer on the goddamn planet? Like, how much money are they willing to lose on that? How much money are they willing to lose making sure they get something out this fiscal year instead of the next fiscal year, hoping that they can fix it down the line when history has shown this entire generation they cannot? You know, Mass Effect Andromeda, they killed one of the most valuable IPs in gaming because of Frostbite and a firm release date. Anthem, they spent 7 years and God knows how money on, hoping to create a new sensation, and then they cut its heart out in the name of Frostbite and this firm release date. They have lost who knows how many Star Wars games. There's the ones we know about, and there's the ones we don't fucking know about, and the ones that will be canceled, like Respawn's game, that's never coming out. And it's like, when will they learn? Every time they run into this wall, they crack their head open, there's blood everywhere, and then they're like, bandage it up, let's do it again. We're gonna get through that wall eventually.
I mean, it feels like they will never learn because I feel like you could go back and create like a clip show of this podcast of like every time we've talked about Anthem, from it being premiered at that E3 to every major news item about it to the beta, of like every single thing we said about the worst case scenario of this game's development, from like the Frostbite stuff to the because I remember talking about well, this is a really good looking E3 demo, but who knows if it's representative of anything, because it looked like a thing I feel like you actually don't see that often, which is the total bullshit E3 demo. Obviously, yes. Every E3 demo is at least some bullshit, but the Uncharted 4 one was from a couple of years ago, was like a really impressive E3 demo, and then you play the game and it's like, yeah, this is that section of the game. Like, they obviously practiced it a little bit, and some small things are different, but it's like they didn't manufacture something completely made up for that. Whereas when you look at the Anthem E3 demo and you look at the actual game, everything is completely different because they hadn't fucking made any video game yet at that point. So we talked about that at that E3 demo. We talked about all the Frostbite shit when all the stories were coming out. And then we talked about how when it kept on getting delayed, I guess this is going to do the same exact fucking thing that Mass Effect Andromeda did, which is going to come out in late February or early March, which is right at the end of EA's fiscal year. And it's going to get dumped there, which is exactly what Jason Schreier talks about. The story is he just literally they said that. That's not just a that's probably why it was released on this date. It's no, they could not push it back this point because capitalism is stupid and consumes itself. I don't know, because it shouldn't matter, but it does. And so, yeah, it's every single step of the way, it has been the same thing that has happened already. It's this publisher and the specific developer.
It's this incredibly short-sighted thinking of we can have a minor hit this year at best, or we could have a cool new IP that lasts for years and years to come. Let's take the minor hit this year, you know? We could save a little money using Frostbite instead of spending a little money to license Unreal or whatever you might use. But if we do that, the game's not going to work, and we're going to spend years more in development, and in the end, we're going to obviously spend way more money trying to figure out how to use fucking Frostbite to do something it was not designed for than if we just licensed Unreal or whatever you use. Let's just use Frostbite. Like, they always make the worst fucking decision. They're, like, EA are just horrible capitalists. You know, and part of it also is that you get a sense from this story and from a lot of the stories like this over the years is that all of these games are very low priority to EA. They seem like high priority to the video game community because there's not a lot written about FIFA or racing games or things like that. But more people buy the sports games, more people buy FIFA. That's what EA cares about because that's what they're making money on. You get the sense throughout the Anthem story, EA didn't really give a shit about this. Like, there's a team within EA designed to help their designers use Frostbite, and Bioware could never get those people on the line because they were much more concerned helping the sports people rather than Anthem, because even best case scenario, Anthem is a wild Destiny level success or higher. It's not going to make the money of a FIFA. So I don't know why EA owns these studios. I don't know why EA publishes Star Wars games. Like, make what you want. It's fine if EA just wants to make the sports games. That's totally fine. But sell this other stuff. Let these developers go free. You're making everyone miserable, and you're not making money. So I don't get it.
Yeah, that's definitely really bad. But I also think for me, like, one of the things is, like, it's clear that it's not just an EA problem. Like, EA's definitely not helping.
Yeah.
But it's also, like, a lot of the stuff that seems like it was going on within BioWare as a studio, like, exacerbated all those problems tremendously. Like, down to the thing you talked about, which of the BioWare Austin studio coming in, because BioWare is split through a couple of different studios. And the BioWare Austin people feeling like they're, like, treated as, like, second-class citizens because they're not the ones that, they're not real BioWare. They didn't make Mass Effect, right? They had just worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic, which, as you pointed out, is they are the team that has the most experience doing the exact same fucking stuff that Anthem's trying to do. They've been doing it for years. Like, I played Star Wars: The Old Republic at launch, and it wasn't, like, you know, as good as World of Warcraft or something, but it was a pretty good MMO, and from what I understand, as it went on in its life and went free to play and stuff, I never went back to it, but the people that did stick with that game or have come to that game later in its life really like Star Wars: The Old Republic. It's a game that, like, quietly makes a lot of money and that, like, people respect and enjoy, and, like, maybe you can take some lessons from them. For me, the most hilarious, in, like, a very dark sense, part of the whole thing, I guess there's two most hilarious things. One is just, there's something about the gag of Casey Hudson being there to start the pre-production of Project Dylan, leaving the company, and then coming back, and the project still has not come out and has to shepherd it to its end, but has missed the entire middle part of its development, which, to be fair, most of the middle part of its development, it seems like nothing much, like, productive happened. But there's something hilarious about, like, he left the company, went and had, like, a reasonable, like detour in his career. I think he was with Microsoft, and then he came back, and the game still was not out. The other thing that is, like, really darkly funny to me is every time they mention Destiny in the article, and there's this whole part of where they talk, like, one of the developers talks about, like, we couldn't say the word Destiny, like, that was a taboo word at the studio. Anytime someone brought up, like, oh, well, you know, maybe Destiny did this with this public events, they'd be like, no, we are BioWare, we are not making Destiny, we're not making a Destiny-like game. And it's like, and then the game comes out, and what is the game that everybody is comparing Anthem to? Fucking Destiny. Do you know why? Because it sure as hell is a lot like Destiny in a lot of ways. Like, from the, like, sci-fi fantasy, like, knights in space, like, with, like, you know, like, robot dudes with magic kind of vibe, very Destiny-esque. And then all the loot shooter stuff and the shared, you know, like, all that is so Destiny, my guys. And if you had maybe spent some time saying, oh, well, Destiny 1 had made these mistakes at launch, and they fixed them these ways. Destiny 2 made these mistakes at launch, and they fixed them these ways. Maybe your game wouldn't come out and be fucking even worse and have all the problems that Destiny 1 had at launch. Learn from the mistakes of everyone else that is making games in that same market. Don't just plug your ears and go la 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 blah blah blah. Like, no, we're making a BioWare game when you're fucking making a loot shooter.
Yeah,
and it's like so sad.
I agree. I think The story of BioWare this generation, very clearly to me, is one of both, A, they're in a terrible corporate situation where EA is the wrong corporate ownership for them, right?
Yeah.
But two, yes, it is the studio themselves. It seems to me like BioWare has gotten too big for its britches, however we want to say that. It probably expanded too much too fast. There is this core team that does not want to play nice with the other teams that really hit Mass Effect Andromeda hard when it was... Is that BioWare Montreal was doing that? Or something?
I think it was Vancouver. I can't remember, because there's like 2 different Canada studios.
Okay. But it was one of the Canada studios, which is now shut down because no one at main BioWare wanted to play nice with them. And then this game comes out partially broken in part because they didn't want to play nice with anyone. While at the same time, their internal studio leadership showed no real leadership for 5 years on Anthem. Like, no one was making decisions. No one was stepping up to call the shots. Like, very clearly, they're a studio that was ill-equipped for the challenges that have faced the gaming industry this generation. And you can put some of that on EA, very, very deservedly so, but you do have to put some of that on the leadership there. And, you know, we'll talk about BioWare's disgusting response to this report, but part of it was they were saying, oh, Jason Schreier shouldn't have named specific developers, that's awful. And it's like, well, you kind of had to in some of this because the fault does lie with certain people, especially if they're in leadership and people who are not in leadership feel they're being mistreated. You got to call this stuff out. You know, one of the saddest things about this report to me is that if you read some of the other, you know, Jason Schreier breaking news stories where he has done this investigative reporting, oftentimes you will get developers talking off the not or on the record but anonymously, and they'll say there were all these problems, but I want it to work. I love working at this studio. I love making games. This is what I like about my company. There was none of that in this story. Not an ounce of it. There was none of that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I want BioWare to work. That was gone. That wasn't in this story. And there were a lot of people who tweeted at Jason Schreier and like reached out to him after it published, who just backed it up and said, "I'm at the end of my rope." Like, there was none of that like glimmer of positivity in it.
Yeah, like, I think for me the most like shocking part of the whole report was the number of like him talking about like there were a lot of people he interviewed that said that they wished that Dragon Age Inquisition had not been successful. Because Dragon Age Inquisition was made under the same kinds of conditions that Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem were, but they kind of just lucked out with Inquisition. Like, one, Inquisition was a more traditional kind of RPG, so I'm guessing that helped them kind of like get it in at the end, is that it was a much more classic kind of Bioware game, so like they had more experience with that than certainly a game like Anthem. Which probably helped prevent that from being as big a train wreck as it could have been. I mean, it wasn't a train wreck, but like, or at least it wasn't a train wreck from people playing the game and seeing it from that perspective. From as a development, it was definitely a train wreck. But like, they kind of lucked out in getting Dragon Age Inquisition to be the level of quality that it is at, and that ultimately has maybe destroyed BioWare in some way. That like, if Dragon Age Inquisition had been a failure, maybe they could have recouped and like readdressed the conditions of this. But because that had succeeded, it feels like they could take Mass Effect Andromeda as being an outlier, even though it wasn't an outlier. It was a more expected outcome of the conditions that BioWare was working under. And then Anthem makes that more clear than anything, that it's like, no, like this is probably what is going to happen to your games. You got very lucky that Dragon Age Inquisition did not crash and fucking burn. And hopefully, like, the best case scenario is that, like, you know, this is not the death for BioWare as a studio, and it allows this like kind of rebirth for them as we are moving now into like a new console cycle. Like, this console cycle has been mostly a wash for that studio, which is tragic because, again, like, going back to Knights of the Old Republic, and then for me, like, later, but going to even like the Baldur's Gate games, BioWare has made consistently some of my favorite games ever, including some of the Dragon Age games, and Mass Effect, and KOTOR, and Baldur's Gate. And for this, more or less this whole generation, because Inquisition came out right at the beginning, to be a total fucking wash for this studio is horrifying. But hopefully they can recoup and figure some shit out and get their act together, and EA, as a publisher, just gets their act together, because they have not just been fucking up with BioWare for sure.
I mean, that's my question: is in a world where EA is still doing their EA thing and forcing Frostbite and forcing these end of fiscal year release dates, I don't know how it gets better. BioWare could be their best selves, and I just don't know.
Well, at least it feels like Frostbite as an engine is getting old. Like it's coming up on like 7 years or whatever, because it's as old as this console generation. It came in with these consoles with Battlefield 4, and maybe it will leave with this console generation. Like maybe
we'll see.
I have to assume that EA is whether it's going to be we're going to be like more willing to let some of our studios work with other engines, because not every EA game uses Frostbite. Like Titanfall is not on Frostbite. Like Titanfall's on like Source or something weird.
Not yet. Weren't there details that like they're being pushed in that direction?
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I feel like there's maybe speculation, but I don't think there's any confirmation.
Okay.
Because Apex isn't a Frostbite game. That's still,
okay.
I'm pretty sure, based on Source stuff. So like hopefully BioWare or EA is definitely at least considering like what is our next step for the engine thing. Whether that is them being smart enough to say like let's be very open about using proprietary engines for our individual developers, or that's like here's Frostbite 2 or whatever they would name their next engine that developed by DICE or whoever internally. Maybe they take it more strongly having an engine that is good for a variety of different games. Like,
yeah.
It's definitely time for them to consider what they're going to do with that shit. It's well past time for that.
There is a conversation to be had. We've hinted at having it before. We need to still, at some point this year, have it, about looking to the next generation and looking back at this generation now that it is starting to wind down, you know? And I think this has been a real mixed bag of a generation. It's been one that has had a lot of highs. Obviously, we've had really good top 10s for a couple of years now, right, Sean?
Oh, yeah.
But Western game development has been a fucking wasteland this generation. And the high points have come from Sony first-party studios. Other than that, you can't point to a lot. You can point to things like Doom. Witcher 3 is obviously up there, and it's Western in the sense that it's Poland, but a little different than how we usually define that.
Hitman's real fucking good.
Absolutely. But they're one-offs. There's not a clear trend. You know, Microsoft has fucking collapsed in their development as the only major video game console publisher that is completely Western. You know, Sony is Japanese, Nintendo is Japanese. They have American partners, but they are not in themselves American. You know, all of the major third parties, EA, Ubisoft, Bethesda certainly has had a lot of ups and downs, you know. Bethesda has probably been the most consistent in a lot of what they've published, but also Bethesda Game Studios, their two games this generation were a Fallout sequel that people were like, it's Fallout, and a Fallout multiplayer game that people were like, oh good god, nothing works. So you know what I mean? Like you know, Blizzard, I guess, has this the thing where the Overwatch is a big hit, and that's great. They haven't had anything else new besides Overwatch. It's just, I think it's been a real up and down for Western game development. I think this generation has shown a lot of chinks in the armor of how time and money and labor intensive video games are to make, and whether or not that is sustainable. Because I think part of why when we say this generation is winding down, and that sounds shocking, isn't just because we've been living it, but because fewer major games have come out, and we've spent we're still getting through the full fucking remaster cycle, and we're all terrified of that starting up again in 2 or 3 years, where I think it will be very possible that there's no backwards compatibility on the PS5. Hopefully it will, but everyone brace yourselves. It's totally possible they don't, and we start it all over again, and the whole system collapses. So, like, you know, there's a lot to have been positive about in video games the last couple of years. We tend to focus on the positivity here. Stories like this, though, are more the norm than they should be.
Yeah, and it's the thing of where it's like, video game development has always had these kinds of stories. Again, like, this is shockingly similar to what happened to Halo 2, but it happened to Halo 2 over the course of like 3 years. This happened to Anthem over the course of 7.
Mm-hmm. And Halo 2 still came out and completely revolutionized online gaming.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, Halo 2 is still like, but like Halo 2 is the Dragon Age Inquisition of Bungie games. Like,
yes,
one that's like, you squeaked that one through. Fucking, but that was luck. Like, it was a big contributor to how that fucking Halo 2 worked at all, let alone be like an amazing game, which it is. But yeah, so video games have always kind of operated in this like very bizarre and unhealthy way, but the intensiveness of how much this shit has gotten protracted over the course of this generation, with just like the amount of time it takes to make a game like this, with like the amount of detail that art assets need and all that kind of stuff, and then the need to integrate, or like the feeling that there is often need to integrate online mechanics or service elements or anything like that. Like, it's a changing landscape, and it's also an incredibly labor-intensive landscape that I feel like, particularly the West, because this is where the most like glamorous video games are made, is in the West. It's been that way for a long time now. It's starting to feel like it is a crisis mode, that it's just like, whether it's unionization or something else, I think it's probably unionization, but something needs to happen to deal with this, because you can't spend 7 years making a game and have it be a bomb. Like, you just can't do that. No, you can't spend that much time. Like, that's the better fucking part of a decade. Like, you can't ask that of a studio. Well, it's too slow and it's too long.
And you can't put out one game a generation, right? Yeah. And it be even if it's a success, that's not enough to sustain things. Yeah, I mean, unionization is step one in terms of protecting workers. It doesn't affect the business model, and the business model is fucked right now. Because the idea
I suspect that, like, if there were reasonable sanctions or whatever put into place for workers, it would eventually have to shift the business model.
Yes.
Because the business model is not sustainable as it is now. It would certainly not be sustainable if we were treating workers fairly.
Yes.
So they would have to shift it at some point.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on, Sean. A couple of other video game announcements. These are less frustrating. Although this one's a little frustrating. Persona 5S was announced by Atlus this week with no details. More details will come on April 25th, the day after Persona 5R, now known as Persona 5 The Royal, will be unveiled on April 24th. What the fuck is Persona 5S? What the fuck is Persona 5R? We still don't know that. And Atlus, why are you doing this? Just tell us what your fucking games are. They're being too cute by half. I love Persona. My patience is wearing thin.
Yeah, it's especially because so much of this stuff had been leaked months ago from like URL stuff. That like I just keep on not knowing how much has been official and how much is not, because nothing, like, even when they say something official, they don't say anything. And so it's like, okay, well, Persona 5 or Persona 5S they have officially acknowledged that. But we've known about that for months. Like, well, I feel like we've known about that since, like, December or something.
Well, what we knew is that they had domain names for Persona 5S and Persona 5R. And when they announced Persona 5R, I think everyone assumed, S and R might have been just alternate names for each other. You often register multiple domains for a single trademark just to cover all your bases. And that Persona 5R was probably the new enhanced version, a la the Golden, and if there was a Switch version, it would be Persona 5R. Now there's R and S, and now we're thinking, because also, and we'll get to this in a second, but there was a Best Buy internal retailer listings leaked, and there was Persona 5 for Switch listed there. So now we're thinking, okay, Persona 5S might be Persona 5 on Switch. Then we've got Persona 5R over here. Does that mean the PS4 is getting an updated version with new content? And does that mean then the Switch is getting vanilla Persona 5? Because that would be fucking weird and not very nice to Switch owners, So, or is it like, I've also seen this suggestion that this is going to be like Persona 3 FES versus Persona 3 Portable, and Persona 5S will have like an alternate girl protagonist route, whereas Persona 5R has something like The Answer, the epilogue campaign to Persona 3, and then it's like, that seems like a clusterfuck in the year 2019 where you really don't need to do that. You can just put it all in one version. So, yeah, we could speculate a little bit. Mostly I just want to get to April 25th and know what the hell these things are, and if they make us wait again, because they've done this like 3 times now, I'm going to throw something at the wall.
Yeah, I did check to just make sure, and at least April 24th and April 25th are both days that will be covered by one podcast.
Good,
because I was really worried that our luck would work out as such that, like, that would have been something that's like right after our podcast was finished, we'd find out what Persona 5S is or something. So we'll at least be able to, when we find out more, we can talk about both of these at the same time. My guess is, because this is the only thing that makes any sort of sense to me, unless Persona 5S is just something completely different. Assuming that Persona 5S is referring to Persona 5 on the Switch, which makes the most sense because that's what Dragon Quest XI-S is. We have this sort of like inkling that Persona 5 is going to be on the Switch based on that Warrior 64 leak on Twitter. So assuming all of that, my guess is that Persona 5S is Persona 5R just on the Switch, and that it will have the same content as Persona 5R, but Persona 5R is like, it would be like if they made Dragon Quest XI R and put that out on the PS4. Like, that's my guess of what this is. Persona 5R is the re-release. It has some like new shit in it. Whatever, if that's like an episode, I guess, equivalent of like the episode Morgana or whatever, or the answer, or it's just like, here's another character like Marie. I don't know. I have no idea what Persona 5R's new material is. I am guessing that those games will be content comparable. That is my assumption.
Yeah, I that does seem like the most likely, but most likely in the sense of, I think this is not a very fat bell curve. I think it's pretty loose, and there's a lot of possibilities within the fat part of the curve. And I think everything I said up earlier are also possibilities.
Yes.
And that confuses me. I want Persona 5 on Switch. Everyone wants Persona 5 on Switch. No one doesn't want Persona 5 on Switch.
I mean, it doesn't affect me in any way.
I know, but it would be cool to have. Yeah, I just want to know what these are. I feel like I don't even have a stake in this anymore. I just want them to stop being so cute about it.
Yes, I'm just annoyed about being dicked around about all this stuff. It's like, if there's another one, if we have to do another podcast that talks about a Persona thing, and then the discussion is, and we have no details about it between now and April 25th, I'm going to be very annoyed.
Yes. So yes, furthermore, we did have these Best Buy internal retailer listings leaked and confirmed by Wario64 on Twitter. Persona 5 on Switch was there, but they also had Metroid Prime Trilogy for Nintendo Switch and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. That last one is weird. We'll get to that next. The first one, Sean, has any video game ever been rumored and leaked and shown on retailer, because this is like the 5th fucking retailer listing it's come up on, has any game had that much of a presence without being announced as Metroid Prime Trilogy?
No,
on
like
Switch?
it is. It's so much so that I keep on forgetting that it hasn't been officially announced, because kind of like with like the URL thing for Persona 5S and Persona 5R, I keep on feeling like they must have said that, because I just hear Metroid Prime Trilogy constantly. Like, people are constantly talking about that that's going to be on the Switch, whether it's something that people talking about that they want to be on the Switch, or different leaks and things like that that have like periodically been coming out. Yeah, it has to be happening. It just, either it's happening or Nintendo is pulling like the best practical joke on the industry ever by just like manufacturing leaks for Metroid Prime Trilogy just because they're assholes or something. I don't know why you would ever do that.
I mean,
but it's like,
I do wonder, because we've had so many Nintendo Directs in a row that were preceded by a leak about Metroid Prime Trilogy, and then it doesn't get announced, that I wonder if it's just like the most fucked up game of telephone ever, where everyone is like, it would make sense, they're doing Metroid Prime 4, they should do it, they're some of the best games ever made, everybody who owns a Switch wants it, all the retailers think it's probably a good idea too, and so they just, I don't know, like maybe people are just putting it in the system because, like, of course it's happening, but no one ever actually checked with their Nintendo rep. I don't know. I don't run Best Buy, so I don't know if that's how it works, but it's fucking weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's not as weird as the notion that there is a leak for Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past on Nintendo Switch.
Yeah. What is that?
I'm struggling to try to figure out what the fuck that would mean.
Let's recap for a second. The next Zelda game we know about is a remake of Link's Awakening. We had the big trailer for that. We know that's coming later this year. This is not a listing for that. Wario64 did say he double-checked with his source, someone who works at Best Buy. Link's Awakening is already in the system. You can go pre-order it, so it's not a mistaken listing for Link's Awakening. I don't think Nintendo is also producing a remake of Link to the Past. I feel like we would have heard about that before Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
If Links to the Past comes to the Switch, we would assume it would be in the form of the online Nintendo Switch Online service, which has NES games now. If they did Super NES games, obviously Link to the Past would be that, but there would not be an individual retailer listing for that. So at this point, there are two possibilities I can think of. One that I've seen suggested is that this is actually it's a mistake, and it's supposed to be for Wind Waker and or Twilight Princess, because there are those Wii U ports. Those are also consistently rumored to be ported to Switch. It would make total sense. Of course, they're going to come at some point, and maybe it's that. The other one I've thought of, Sean, is maybe they're never doing SNES games on the Nintendo Switch Online, and they're going back to the virtual model and just selling games a la carte, and this is going to be one of them, and they're going to announce that soon and be like, yeah, that Nintendo Switch Online service, you're only ever getting NES games with that. If you want Link to the Past, $8, you can have it. But they're a la carte now.
Man, that would be the darkest. Like,
it's possible.
Oh my, it is possible. Like, Nintendo has been so weird about their fucking retro catalog for the longest time. Which, because even like, the virtual console stuff was definitely an imperfect solution, but nothing they've done since certainly has been better. It's been like very strange. Like for me, I think there are. Because one obvious possibility is always like this is a mistake of some form. Whether it's just a mistake completely and there's no game that it's referring to and it's just like an utter fuck up somehow. Or there's a different Legend of Zelda game that it's supposed to be. But that's like, it seems weird to me that it would be Wind Waker or Twilight. Like, I could see it being Link's Awakening because those titles are similar enough that I could see how like an intern would like Google, like, I don't know, however fuck that shit works, but like, would that mistake, sure, those titles are similar enough. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess are very different titles than Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past. I find it hard to figure out how the fuck you'd mix that up. I think that there is a chance that it is it doesn't feel like a very big Nintendo move, but I think it's possible that they are just making a remake of Link to the Past with the same tech that they're doing for Link's Awakening, and that it will have like the same aesthetic style, like be made on those same tools. That's something that's like, again, it doesn't feel like a Nintendo thing to do.
It feels weird to do it in that
possible.
It feels weird to do it in that order too, when Link's Awakening is the direct sequel to Link to the Past.
Yeah, it would definitely be weird. But every answer to the question of why is it here is weird. Yes. There's no answer to this that's like, oh, of course, that must be what it is. Of course, they're going to make you pay $5 to fucking buy a Switch cart that only has Link to the Past on it, which would be amazing. They just sold it. It would be more expensive to manufacture the fucking cart at some point than the amount of money it is reasonable to charge someone for Link to the Past in 2019.
Because I also think, like, the other thing people, like, there's no significant anniversary coming up for Link to the Past. Like, I think that game is 1990. What is it? I think it's 93. Let me look this up. Okay, we'll vamp for a second while we're looking this up. A Link to the Past is 1991. Okay, 1991.
Wow, that's earlier than I thought.
Yeah, so that's 28 years. We're 2 years away from the 30th anniversary. Yeah. Oh, who the hell knows? There's no good answer to this one. Let's move on.
I've got it.
Okay.
It's a full 3D remake of Legend of Zelda Link to the Past. That they've just completely remade that game, but like Ocarina of Time style. Which is in some ways what Ocarina of Time already is.
That is true.
But they're doing it anyways.
All right. Finally from Nintendo, this is official this week. We learned that Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game that we do know is on Switch, and Super Mario Odyssey are both getting VR modes for the Nintendo Labo VR Kit. The Nintendo Labo VR Kit is launching on April 12th. So later this week, actually, when you're listening to this, it's launching in two versions. One that has a bunch of extra bells and whistles and is $80, and one that is just the VR kit plus the gun thing, and that's $40. And there will be modes for Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild in VR. For Mario Odyssey, it's a specific series of extra missions that are VR-oriented. For Breath of the Wild, it's a toggle option where I guess you just play the game in VR. This sounds kind of cool because these are probably the two best and two of the most widely owned games on the Nintendo Switch. And clearly more of a killer app for VR than, some of the Labo things they were talking about. But also, they are much more of video games than anything else the Labo has. I don't think any of us were expecting the VR Labo to do anything like this, because it doesn't seem like the Switch is very well equipped for it. And the Labo itself isn't really either. I don't know if you've seen this, Sean, but the Labo VR is not a headset. You don't put it on and there's a strap. You have to hold it up physically and play it like that. So, Breath of the Wild is a game you sit down and play for hours on end. That would be very hard to do here. It sounds like a cool novelty, and I'll be perfectly honest, because I could get a VR Labo set for like $30 with my Best Buy discount, I very well might do that for a story on the podcast.
Oh, you 100% should. I would be upset with you if you did not.
Yeah.
You need to do this and take a picture of you with it on your face. I need that.
I think that
has to happen.
I think we will try this because, again, it's a very low cost of entry, which is cool. Like, I feel like I'm not going to be losing much if I try this.
Yeah, because you own the Switch and you own both of those games.
Yeah.
And so all you need to do is buy some cardboard.
Yeah, and construct it, which will probably be fun. Maybe more fun than using it at the end. But yeah, I don't know. I'll say this, Sean. If I didn't have a podcast, I don't know if I would drop the money.
Yeah, like the Mario Odyssey thing makes some amount of sense. I mean, none of it makes sense with like there's no strap and there's no proper controller. Because again, that means that the only way to use the controller is you have the Joy-Cons attached to the side of the Switch and you are holding the Switch up to your face while you are playing it, which has just got to be, the fucking Nintendo 64 controller has now been thoroughly outclassed as the most uncomfortable way to play a video game. If this is like how that fucking works, because that's physically the only way it could work, that just seems absurdly uncomfortable. Maybe like the solution is to like just play it laying on your back in bed, and that's like,
what I was thinking of. Yeah,
even that your arms are going to get tired, but it's going to be a lot better than like sitting in a chair or standing straight up, and like kind of gravity work for you a little bit. But yeah, but of the two games, Mario Odyssey makes some amount of sense because that game already runs at a very like stable 60 frames per second, and they're making a specific mode for it. The idea of Breath of the Wild, a game that doesn't even run at a stable 30 frames per second.
It does now after patches, but...
Okay, sure. But even then, it's running at 30 frames per second, and you're holding that up to your face on a 720p screen while trying to play it with your hands like on the fucking Joy-Cons on the side. And a game that is... a traditional third-person camera game, which means the third-person camera rotates around Link's character model. All of those things combined together sounds like Nintendo is trying to make the most vomit-inducing fucking VR game imaginable. Because, I have not played VR myself, but I've always been very interested in it since this, like, big wave of VR. And particularly in, like, 2016 when the Rift and the Vive and the PSVR originally came out, and we had this whole, like, big, like, VR kind of explosion that happened for a little bit where all these new games are coming out and all these indie devs were putting shit out. I was constantly reading stories and watching videos of people talking about it because I was curious about it. And it seems to me that, like, the most important things you need for VR to make it a comfortable experience for people is, one, have really comfortable controllers. 2, have a nice high resolution screen. 3, have a very stable, high frame rate. Like, higher than 60 frames per second is what you should have, and have it be very stable. Like, a stable 60 frames per second is like the is the floor. In the way for like a normal console game, a like stable 30 frames should be the floor. Anything below that is like you're like docking off some points because it's affecting the experience. Although in this case, affecting the experience isn't, it's hard to get the headshot. It's, I'm feeling queasy. And then the other thing you need is like really well-designed camera options in a variety of different camera options, because different people become nauseous by different things in VR. So some people need, if you're playing like a first-person game and you want to be able to rotate the camera and kind of reposition it with like a thumbstick, that it like kind of fades out and fades in like 15-degree angles. And so instead of it being a smooth rotation on the right thumbstick. You like tap the right thumbstick to the right, and then the view shifts 15 degrees to the right with like a fade and like a fade to black and a fade in. And that allows people to kind of reorient themselves without something else moving your viewpoint while your head is staying like straight and staring forward. That seems to be the number one thing that causes people to vomit. And that's for like first person games that are already designed for VR. The idea of that then being like a third person camera rotating around a central point character instead of being like Astrobot or something where you're like staring down a lane or from like a side point view of the character, but third person while you're like, experientially, your head is rotating up and around Link. Like, the idea of that is so hilarious to me. And it's like, I'm so desperate to find out if that's really how it works, because that's what it looked like based on that video. You need to buy it, you need to take some pictures, and I need to know if it makes you throw up.
I definitely, after talking about this, I so want to do it, because I'm just... It's so... If they hadn't announced this, I think we all would have said, okay... It's an extension of the Labo line. It's not there for VR the way we typically think of VR. It's just part of... It's a toy. It's for kids. We wouldn't have batted an eyelash at it, right?
Yeah, it's for, like, 6-year-olds. Yeah. Like, it's like, whatever, like, fine.
But you bring Breath of the Wild into it, and now it's like, okay, you have my attention. I don't know if you have my enthusiasm. You have my attention.
Yeah.
So
very weird.
More on that. Labo launches. VR Labo launches this week on the 12th. These games will not be updated to work with it until April 25th. So I know,
no, but that's longer than I thought. Yeah. Well, we'll be able to find out hopefully whatever the Persona 5 games are, and we'll find out if it makes you throw up on the same podcast.
Boy,
so look forward to. Yeah, that podcast that we'll record on the 28th. I like want to mark that in my calendar now. Like, we're not missing that one.
That is that's gonna be a weird week. That's all I can say. All right, Sean, let's do some movie news.
Okay, yeah, what's going on with movies?
I've got a piece of movie news that I genuinely don't know how either of us are reacting to, and then one that is just there for us to laugh at. So let's start with the one, Joker. Joker is the new movie by Todd Phillips, formerly of Old School and the Hangover trilogy. He is writing and directing this new Joker film starring Joaquin Phoenix, who is definitely in contention for the title of Best Actor of the 2010s because of movies like The Master and Inherent Vice and Her and Lynn Ramsey's new film You Were Never Really Here, and just an incredible actor who's had a great career renaissance this decade. And then we were all very confused when he signed up for a standalone Joker movie from the guy who did Hangover Part 3. And we were all like, that's a little weird. Now there is a trailer. There is a poster. The trailer is pretty meaty. It's a full 2.5 minutes. It's not a teaser. And I will say this. I don't know if I'm, quote-unquote, excited for the movie. I do have a sense of what they're going for. What they're going for is very clearly... Martin Scorsese does the Joker. It is Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy. So much so that Robert De Niro is in the movie. He shows up, and I thought, that's a little on the nose, guys, to put Robert De Niro in your Taxi Driver Joker movie. Again, I don't know if it'll be good, but I guess I'll say this. It answered the question for me of why did Joaquin Phoenix want to do this beyond Joaquin Phoenix needs money too. And now I see why he wanted to do this movie to get money rather than... You know, he was rumored for Doctor Strange. I understand why he didn't want to do Doctor Strange. This one makes sense to me.
Yeah, my reaction is basically the same as yours. Except for, like, I am frustrated that I feel like there was a point in my life where I could, reasonably look at a rumor that a movie was being made and be like, that movie is never going to actually be made. And now we have Detective Pikachu, Joker... and this fucking Sonic the Hedgehog movie, all of them are being made. The only one that we don't have a trailer for yet is the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, but enough has come out that obviously that movie's happening.
And they did show footage. This is out of CinemaCon, which both of our news items are today. There was more I could have included, but we didn't actually see the Sonic footage, but people described it. It does not sound good.
Yeah, so those movies, all three of those movies are happening, and... I'm sad because I feel like that means movies are dying in some way. If this is the past, like even though both these movies, like Detective Pikachu and the Joker movie, these trailers they look for like trailers for pretty good movies. It's just like, but whether they're good or not, they probably shouldn't exist. I don't know. But yeah, this is definitely Taxi Driver Joker. And And it's a good trailer. Like, I'm definitely way more curious about it now than I was anytime they were talking about it before. But it is. But like, one of the things that was, I thought, interesting about my reaction to the trailer was every time I was reminded that this was not just like a dude who dresses up like a clown and murders people and is specifically supposed to be the Joker, and that this takes place in Gotham, and presumably like there will be Easter eggs and Bruce Wayne stuff in it. Every time I was reminded of that, I became less interested in it. Like, there's something about it that's like any attachment it has to the Joker character or the Batman mythos, to me just feels like it's going to hold the movie back from being what could be like a pretty interesting thing. And it could still be good. I just don't. I get every time like there's like a line in the trailer where they say the word Gotham, and you see like Arkham Asylum or something on the side of a building. And both times that happened in the trailer, I was kind of taken out of it for a little bit because it just felt like, why? Like, it really just feels like at some point it doesn't even need to be a Joker movie, because the Joker removed from Batman as a character is like the Joker becomes a totally different character. Like, there are lots and lots of different fucking serial killing clowns in the history of popular culture. The Joker's not the only one. You can make another movie about a dude who's the clown who kills people. They made that movie like 2 years ago. It's called It. Like, you can do that. You can just do that. And so every time the Batman stuff came up, it just kind of disappointed me in a weird way.
I agree. It distracted me too. But here's my bigger problem with the movie, Sean. If you take away the Batman stuff, it's Taxi Driver and it's the King of Comedy. Like, very clearly. Yes. Like, it's wearing its influences so on its sleeves, I don't know why it needs to exist. Because thematically, a movie about an isolated, loner, depressed white guy who goes on a killing spree is very relevant for the year 2019. The problem is, Martin Scorsese made it with Taxi Driver. He got it perfect. Taxi Driver packs exactly as much of a punch in 2019 as it did in the 1970s. And then he made it again with a movie called The King of Comedy, which, if you haven't seen, is also Robert De Niro. It's also Scorsese. It is basically just Taxi Driver, but instead of him committing violence and being sort of this political outcast sort of guy, he is an aspiring comedian who sort of loses his sense of reality and kidnaps Jerry. It's not Jerry Lewis. I forget who it is. But anyway, he kidnaps a comedian and takes his spot on the show and does this routine. King of Comedy, I actually think, is the better movie of the two. It's an incredibly incisive, uncomfortable film, and both of those, again, have only become more relevant with time. There's no need to do the new King of Comedy or the new Taxi Driver. Just show those movies. They feel like they were made about today. And I guess that's my thought, is that there's plenty of superhero movies that do sort of riffs on things like this, like Logan is riffing on a lot of neo-westerns, but there's no one neo-western you point to and say Logan is just that, but now he has claws. Logan is its own movie. Maybe Joker will be its own movie, but so far it looks like it's a Martin Scorsese fan project, and there are many worse things you could do, but I don't know. That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, it's definitely, at least based on that trailer, it just feels like the pitch is so far away from anything comic booky or superhero that it just feels like, guys, you don't need that license. I mean, obviously the movie would not be being made if it wasn't, if they didn't have that license and all that stuff. I know that, practically speaking, of course, but in an ideal world, it just feels like it's holding that movie back from whatever else it would want to be.
Speaking of news out of CinemaCon, so, we've joked about this before, Sean. There's a movie coming out that is an adaptation of the Broadway show Cats. Cats being the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. He did Phantom of the Opera. Cats is probably his second most famous show. And we've joked about it before. I've told the anecdote about how I was in a class on musicals and I raised my hand and I asked, is Cats real? And everyone was like, what do you mean it's cat? I'm like, I'm serious. You all guys all think I'm joking. I know I'm a jackass. I'm often sarcastic, but this is the most serious I've ever been. Is cats real?
We also talked about how the cast of this movie would be the perfect cast for a new James Bond movie.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Idris Elba and Ian McKellen and everything. Oh, my God.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing cast. It's Tom Hooper, who did Les Miserables. That's just one of the great career turns, going from Les Miserables to Cats. That's amazing. But now we've learned out of CinemaCon... So in the Broadway show, it's always people dressed up as cats and they're doing cat shit, right?
Yeah, people have certainly seen pictures of
Yes.
that, whether you are convinced that it's from a real thing or not.
It's very weird. But what we saw now... See, I'll just read from I'm reading from IO9, published a story on this. In the reel, which was largely shot on set, Hooper revealed he wanted to bring the musical to life in a very 2019 way. To do that, he's using performance capture to make his actors look like they have real fur on them. And so what the audience saw at the presentation were clips of actors in those fancy suits, complete with dots and everything. Some had cameras attached to their heads, others did not. It'll eventually look something like Avatar's Na'vi, but with fur, and the actors said they studied cat movements for the film. And much of those soon-to-be digitally enhanced performances were shot on sets that are 3 to 4 times their usual size to give the actors a cat's eye view. In other words, they're going to be the size of cats as they sing, huge chairs and tables with the actors running and dancing under them. Sean, Hollywood has too much money. That is my reaction. If you are spending this kind of money on fucking cats, take it, burn them down, it's over.
So I know that this is not a question that we can answer because nobody has actually seen the musical Cats. Are they supposed to be cat-sized and on the set of the musical Cats, are there big chairs? Because that's the part more than the CG, which is a horrifying solution. But of course they're fucking making them CG. It's Hollywood in 2019. They don't know what a fucking practical effect or a prosthetic is anymore. Look at the fucking Hobbit movies. So of course they're CGI. But I just had always been under the impression that yeah, they're cats, but they're anthropomorphic people. I just never thought that they were actually supposed to be cats. They're weird cat. They're meant to evoke the cat, but very clearly they're anthropomorphized. There's no excuse. There's no way any audience accepts the idea of that these are actually cats. That is a bridge too fucking far for any audience to suspend their disbelief. That is a monumental task to expect me to look at those things and say those are cat-sized creatures that live in a world where they are like normal cats. So for the sake of the audience, they just look like scary people.
Sean, I'm going to read you a little bit from the plot synopsis of the musical Cats.
Oh, God. Okay.
After the overture, the cats gather on stage and explain the Jellicle tribe and its purpose. The cats then notice that they are being watched by a human audience and proceed to explain how the different cats of the tribe are named. This is followed by a ballet dance performed by Victoria the White Cat to signal the beginning of the Jellicle Ball. At this moment, Mongoose Trap, the show's main narrator, explains that tonight the Jellicle patriarch Old Deuteronomy will make an appearance and choose one of the cats to be reborn into a new life on the Heavenside layer. The first contender Mongoose Trap introduces is Jenny Anydots, the old Gumby cat, a large tabby cat who lazes around all day, but come nighttime she becomes active, teaching mice and cockroaches various activities to curb their naturally destructive habits. Just as Jenny Anydots finishes her song, the music changes suddenly, hence Mongoose Trap's annoying younger brother, Rum Tum Tugger, makes his extravagant entrance in front of the tribe. He is very fickle and unappeasable, for he will do as he do, and there's no doing anything about it. Keep in mind, Rum Tum Tugger is being played by Sir Ian McKellen.
Yeah, So, 1, fuck you for reading that. 2, it doesn't answer my question. It doesn't answer my question, but it does. Because nothing you just said is something that cats do. They're not cat. I know that they're supposed to look like cats. I know that it's called Cats. I get that. But that's nothing you just said sounded if you took out the word cat and you blanked that out and it was a test question about what animal is this referring to? Nobody would answer Cat. Everyone would just be like, there is no possible answer. Like, cross it out. It's like, no. That doesn't describe any recognizable behavior of any animal on Earth. What? Oh, my God. Musical theater was a mistake.
It was. And, Sean, I think cats is going to be a pretty constant topic on this show this year because we're both very confused by it.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing it. You can't. No.
What if we... No. If we restart the Patreon, Sean, what is the amount of money we would have to raise for you to go see Cats in a movie theater?
$100,000.
Okay. Well, get on it, people.
It's $500,000 if you expect me to go to a fucking live performance. The only reason it's that low is that it's the movie. And at least Idris Elba and Ian McKellen are in the movie, even if they're playing scary CGI cats.
You know, Taylor Swift is also in the movie. Yeah. I assume, to try to answer the question, what could possibly sink Taylor Swift's career at this point in time? And I think the answer is pictures of her as a mocap cat circulating the internet. All right.
Yeah, man, after you reading that synopsis, your question of, in that class, of is cats actually real makes even more sense. Because, like, I'm still not convinced. Like, it feels like it's a weird urban legend of, like, you know, people are like, oh, there was a musical called Cats, right? It had Rum Tum Tugger, and they're like thinking of some totally different thing. It's like Mandela Effect.
Yes.
That's got to be what Cats is.
All right. Sean, you want to do some Dragon Ball news?
I'm always up for some more Dragon Ball news, Jonathan.
All right. We've got a piece of news and then also just amusing. So let's start with the musing.
Yeah.
I haven't done research on this. It just occurred to me when I was walking out of a grocery store the other day, and I had to write it down to make sure we talked about it. Sean, you and I have talked a lot on this show about the merger, the acquisition, really, of 20th Century Fox into the Walt Disney Company.
Yes.
A thought occurred to me. The last 3 Dragon Ball movies, this would be Battle of Gods, Resurrection F, and Broly, have all had the 20th Century Fox logo on them at the beginning, because Fox produced the live-action movie that no one saw, Dragon Ball Evolution, in the year 2009. Because of this, 20th Century Fox owned the North American film rights, so for Funimation to get them into theaters, they had to, like, I don't know, give 20th Century Fox a cut of the grosses and put their logo on it, right? Now, Disney now owns Fox. Ergo, I don't know what the specific relationship is, but Disney owns part of Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball is in some way related to the Walt Disney Company. I want to break something now.
I'm very excited for Kingdom Hearts 4, where at the very end they're fighting. I already lost the name of the fucking guy, the villain from Kingdom, Xehanort. They're fighting Xehanort again because they couldn't come up with another villain because he's been the villain for so long that even though his story's supposed to be done with Kingdom Hearts 3, they are not going to create another massive villain. They're just going to do another version of Xehanort. So he shows up, and then everyone's getting their ass kicked. And then just out of nowhere, Goku instant transmissions into the game. It's like, hey, what's up, guys? Oh, this guy's, you know, he's evil? Okay, Kamehameha! And then just, it's like, okay, bye, I gotta go back to the tournament. And then he's out. Like, I'm gonna love Kingdom Hearts 4 when that comes out. It'll be the first Kingdom Hearts I play, because that's what they're going to do, because Disney owns everything now.
I want to be clear, Disney does not own Dragon Ball. Like, Funimation is still the rights holder in North America. Toei is still the parent right holder. It's just that if there is another Dragon Ball movie, in some way they're going to have to negotiate with Disney because they had to negotiate with Fox, and now Disney owns Fox. So that is fucking weird. I'm not saying, like, we're going to get the next Dragon Ball movie is going to have the fucking Disney logo at the beginning and Once Upon a Star or whatever it is. But, like, it's weird to me. Disney owning The Simpsons fucks with my head enough. Disney owning my Dragon Ball really hurts. Hurts my heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, Sean, you want to talk about the big Dragon Ball news this week?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's crack this walnut open.
All right, so this week, Funimation opened pre-orders for the Dragon Ball Z 30th Anniversary Blu-ray box set. They had been hinting at this for a while, that they and Toei were teaming up to do a limited run of the series, and they had some preview images that had the 4-star and the 3-star Dragon Ball, which indicated to everyone this would be a proper 4x3 release of the series. People got their hopes up because it has been a while since Funimation did a new home video release. The last one started in 2013. And for reasons we'll talk about for a while, in a little bit, Funimation's home video releases of Dragon Ball have been mostly fucked up, and the one good one they did is ridiculously out of print. And so people were kind of looking forward to this. There had been the recent Blu-ray restorations of the movies in Japan, and on Blu-ray those were a little hit or miss, but when they hit, they were very good. And there had been indications that Toei might be gearing up to do the whole series. Maybe this was Funimation was going to put it out at the same time as Toei, and that would be cool. None of that is true. What we got is they announced this. It's the entire series on 37 discs. They are in the original 4x3 aspect ratio, sort of. They have a Goku statue that comes with it and an art book. They said that this is the first time there's ever been a Dragon Ball art book in North America. That is ridiculously untrue, and I don't know why Funimation lies in their advertisements, but they love doing that. They also said it's the first time it's ever been on 4x3 on Blu-ray, which just also is not true, but whatever. The set costs $350. It will not be, your credit card won't be charged, and the set will not be produced unless they get 3,000 pre-orders. So it's kind of like Kickstarter. The pre-order period lasts until May 5th, and at the time of this recording, 2,350 have already been ordered. So this is clearly going to happen. It's only been up a couple days. It will happen. They're only going to produce 6,000 total, they said, although I think if it sells up to 6,000, they will sell more, because I don't know why they wouldn't. Yeah. They also released a 1-minute trailer for the set. Because up to now, everything sounds okay. The art book lie is weird. $350 is a lot, but not completely unreasonable if it were a really good version of this 300-episode series, right?
Yeah.
But the trailer looked awful. It's basically a 4x3 version of the current very bad season sets on Blu-ray, which are 16:9 and smeared to Kingdom Come via DNR, but possibly, via fan analysis we learned, these have even less visible information in them because it is such a tight crop of the 4x3 area that the 16:9 versions, paradoxically, might contain more visual information. It is always possible that the video in this trailer is not indicative of the final set, but I will say, I have been following Funimation most of my life on Dragon Ball. They have never put out a trailer that was not indicative of the quality of the final set. They use footage from the thing itself. They have always done that. And there was no indication given, and people have been asking them all weekend, and if it were not indicative of the final product, I assume someone from Funimation would say that.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Now, Sean, before we react, should I give a brief history of DBZ on home video and why this is frustrating?
Yeah, go ahead, because I think it's important context to know what's going on for people who have not tried to engage with home releases of Dragon Ball in the past.
We're going to start in the year 2000 because there's a lot that happened in the 90s, but let's just start at the year 2000 for simplicity's sake. In 2000, Funimation started putting out uncut DVDs of Dragon Ball Z. They started with the Captain Ginyu saga. This was the first time Dragon Ball Z was released uncut, which is just to say the footage had not been altered. And it also had Japanese audio with English subtitles. This was the first time they did that. From there, from 2000 to 2005, they went out of order. They would jump around. They would do some of the Boo, then they might do some of the Cell games. And the Great Saiyaman Saga actually wound up being the last two to come out way in 2004, but they jumped around a bunch. What they couldn't do was the Saiyan Saga and everything in Namek up to Captain Ginyu, because those were still in a rights dispute with Pioneer Entertainment, who held the home video rights, even though Funimation always owned the distribution rights and the property itself, and had the original, the dub that is on the Pioneer disc is still Funimation. Sometimes people call it the Pioneer dub. That's wrong. But anyway, they couldn't put those out. In 2005, they finally got the rights back from Pioneer, which was no longer a company, I don't think. And they started putting out those episodes uncut for the first time in America. So with Japanese audio and with a dub matched to the uncut footage. These were called the Ultimate Uncut Editions. This was still the time when we did 3 episodes per volume, right? In 2006, these versions get canceled before the Saiyan Saga is even finished, let alone we get to Namek, right? So we haven't even fought Vegeta yet. These get canceled. They had all aired on Cartoon Network, I should say, uncut, and I know that because at the time I made VHS tapes of all of them because I could not afford the DVDs, so I recorded them off Cartoon Network. So they got canceled. In 2007, they come back with what are now known as the Orange Brick season sets. This is the first time they released the show in 9 seasons. So season 1 through 9, those seasons refer to nothing because animes do not have seasons. And in North America, there were seasons, but they did not line up with how they did this. They called it season for no good reason. These sets were cropped to 16 by 9, so to widescreen from the original 4:3 aspect ratio. So the top and bottoms were cut off, which means in most scenes, you would only see the top half of someone's mouth while they talked, and it looked bad. They were also DNR'd to hell. DNR refers to digital noise reduction. That is when you blur the grain out of filmic footage, and it really just crushed the details. These also had very bad, poor color correction. But a lot of us owned these, myself included, because it was the first time the entirety of DBZ was available uncut, subbed, and dubbed on home video in the US, and they were cheap. They were really cheap. This also completely revolutionized the anime industry in North America because it was the first time someone broke the 3 episodes per DVD formula. The first season set had 39 episodes. It was a godsend, even if it looked like shit. In 2000...
Yeah, I want to say, just for the record, these are the ones... We've hit the first thing that I have bought.
Okay.
So I have the first 4 seasons. I think I stopped after that because it was too much.
Yeah.
Like the cropping and stuff, I started to just notice it too much and couldn't watch it anymore.
Yeah, I think I had up through season 7, and then in 2009, they announced they were releasing the Dragon Boxes in North America. We have to back up again. The Dragon Boxes were the home video release in Japan, and the only home video release. They later broke them out as singles, but these are the only masters in Japan for the show. The Dragon Boxes were basically the definitive restorations done from 2002 to 2005. They did Z, then Dragon Ball, then GT, then the movies. And in Japan, they went back to the original negatives, the best materials. It's a very good restoration, and they put those out in Japan like that. They're very beautiful. In the US, we got all of Dragon Ball Z. They did not do the Dragon Boxes for the other shows, but they did Z. It was the first time DBZ had all of the original Japanese credits, all of the next episode previews, all those bells and whistles. It looked beautiful. It was in 4:3, beautiful packaging, really nice hardcover books and everything. But they are limited editions, they never have additional print runs, and they now go for very high prices on eBay. For reference, I saw today one of them sold a complete set of all 7 Dragon Boxes for $1,000 today.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had never known until later, when you must have told me about these at some point, because this was when we were in high school. But when these were released, I did not know that they existed, so I never got them. And then it was only after the point where it would have been unreasonable to buy them that I knew that they existed at all.
Yes. So I bought them as they came out. It was high school, so I was like scrimping together pennies to get these sets, but I did get them, and I'm very glad I did, because I still watch them. They are, I'll say this later, if you own these, they're perfect. They're exactly what I want Dragon Ball to look like. I will never need anything more, which is why the Funimation announcement doesn't piss me off as much as it does some people. But I can't say, Sean, you should go buy the Dragon Boxes. They're perfect, because you cannot just go buy the Dragon Boxes. So in 2011, just as the last Dragon Box comes out, Funimation announces they're doing the series yet again on Blu-ray this time. They are the level sets. This is a really ambitious restoration effort by Funimation. Funimation does not own the original master negatives of Dragon Ball, obviously, but for Z specifically, they do own 16mm dupe prints, which is like 3rd or 4th generation. So they have film to work on. This is why they are able to crop the series, do all this stuff to it. They can't ever do that to Dragon Ball or GT because they only own those as digibetas. For Z and the movies, though, they do own prints. So they were doing a really nice restoration, scanning them in 4K, doing all the blemish removal, color correcting everything. They put out 2 of these. They are 17 episodes apiece. They're a little pricey, but people really like them. They're a beautiful restoration. If this had been completed, it probably would be the definitive video presentation of DBZ. But within 6 months from their announcement, not just their release, their announcement, it's canceled because of low sales. They didn't even get to the end of the Saiyan saga. Episode 34 is 1 episode before Vegeta leaves Earth. And yes, so the level sets die, and we're all very sad. And then 2 years later, 2013, they start the Blu-ray season sets. These are just the orange bricks on Blu-ray. Now, they did redo the restoration. It's not even really a restoration. They did the crop a little bit more. On the orange bricks, it was just a center crop across all 291 episodes. This time, they actually manually did the crop, so it's a lot more watchable. You know, mouths don't get cut off because they'll go down for some shots, up for others. But the DNR and post-processing and color correction is even more extreme, and now the show looks like it was animated in Microsoft Paint. So that's where we are. There was one good release of Dragon Ball Z. It was the Dragon Boxes. Not many people own it. It's very rare. Otherwise, the only way to buy or stream, now that they've started streaming, Dragon Ball Z in North America is as cropped, butchered bullshit. Hence, we are excited for the 30th anniversary set, and womp womp, it's just the season sets with a different crop.
Yes. So thank you for that explanation, because it's very frustrating. Obviously, so for me, when I watched these in Japanese, I maybe did not avail myself of the available home video releases and use other means, because fuck this bullshit. I'm not going to watch the whole thing in Japanese in 16:9. So I did not.
I'm curious, what version did you wind up downloading to watch?
I don't remember.
Was it the Dragon Box Masters?
Yeah, it probably was. It was a while ago, so I don't remember specifically what I went for, but that probably was what it was.
I will specifically offer you this to you, Sean. Hypothetically, I may have ripped every volume of the Dragon Boxes completely losslessly into video files in case anything ever happens to the DVDs, because they're really rare. And I don't know, if any podcast co-hosts I know of would like, a really nice copy of the Dragon Boxes that's one-to-one to the DVDs and would ever like me to give those to them, maybe they could ask. Hypothetically.
Yeah, in a hypothetical situation, that might be something that would be worth asking for. Yeah, that's an interesting comment. But yeah, so I have seen all of Dragon Ball Z in 4x3 and everything, so it's like there are ways around this. You just have to be comfortable with pirating or something like that, or having friends who maybe can lend you DVDs that you can watch physically on a thing that you just have the DVD and you just watch it. But yeah, so the thing that's maybe the most galling about all of this is in the trailer, the 1 minute trailer they put up on Twitter for this 30th anniversary set. It's voiced by the guy who's the Dragon Ball announcer in English, the last time on Dragon Ball Z, that guy. He does the voice for the whole trailer. And there's one part where he says something to the effect of now released in the original 4x3, and it's you don't get to, one, you don't get to say that because you cropped it all fucking weird. I don't even understand why. It just seems like that's more work at some point than just releasing the original version. But also, it never should have not been in 4x3. There was never any reason for it to just not be a fucking 4x3. Or at the very least, if you desperately feel like you need to crop it because you just think that people will never accept watching something in 4x3, you can make the option on the fucking DVD. It's one of the amazing things about DVDs is you can just do that shit. Or certainly when you put it out on the fucking Blu-rays and you have all that kind of space. So it's just really, really annoying to have a company just try to tout the 4x3 thing when, one, they're still fucking it up anyways, and two, it never should have been a problem. You're not fixing a problem. This isn't something of and we restored the footage, we cleaned up the audio. No, that's not what this is. You're trying to fix something that you never should have fucked up in the first place, and you can't. It's very annoying to have that video come out and act like that's a big triumphant thing.
It would
and
be
to have on your little tease the 4-star Dragon Ball and the 3-star Dragon Ball, be oh, we're finally going to release this in 4x3, which is the most bare fucking basic thing you could ever do.
It would be if there's a lot of speculation, Sean, that the Criterion Collection is going to get Citizen Kane this year for Spine 1000. And what if Criterion Collection says, we've got Citizen Kane, once-in-a-lifetime set, and we haven't colorized it. It's still in black and white. That would be the weirdest fucking thing. It's that's bare minimum, guys. That's the movie.
Yeah. And again, it's it's galling because, Again, it's not something that you should have to even put effort into doing. Like, it's not, you're not fixing up the footage. You're not changing the idea. Like, you're not messing with it to try to make it better. You're fixing something that you fucked up on it with. It's like no. Like, you spent effort making it worse. And we want you to walk back the effort you spent making it worse to just make it the way it should normally be, at least. That would be better. Like, it would be better for me to just fucking watch a video stream of the episodes that was, like, copied from when they aired on Toonami than for me to watch the fucking Orange Brick thing at some point, because I can't, like, the 16:9 thing is so disastrously awful.
Dragon Ball Z is, without competition, the most famous anime on the planet. Is that true? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, internationally for sure.
Yes, it is the most famous anime. People know that and Pokemon. You know, Pokemon is more than an anime, but still.
Yeah.
And yet, there is no way for me to recommend to a new viewer, here is where you go to watch Dragon Ball Z legally and easily in an acceptable way. There's no way for me to send someone to go watch the series I love, because the series I love is not cropped to 16:9. It does not have all detail, color, and life smeared the fuck out of it through digital post-processing. It's, I have my Dragon Boxes. This is no skin off my back. But I do care about the franchise, and I care about other people getting to watch it. And it's annoying as hell that they can't get this very, very simple thing right. Now let's talk, Sean, about why this release is bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So even if they broke it, if they had fixed it at, decently, we might have been happy. I have some stills here, Sean, going back and forth. We've got the new version from their trailer on the top, and then Dragon Boxes on the bottom. And you can see here, first, Sean, we've got a shot of Raditz, then we've got a shot of people in town, and then we have Goku flying on the Kintoan, the cloud. These are all from Episode 1. This is also notable. All the footage they showed is from DBZ Episode 1. So take that for what you will. In all of these, you can see the Dragon Box has significantly more footage around the border. The new release is pretty far zoomed in. In addition to that, the Dragon Box has very rich, nuanced color. It has very visible grain. Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball and GT and all of these, except for the movies, were all captured on 16mm film, which is naturally grainy. The animation was animated with the expectation that it would be shown with grain, because that gives it texture and makes the drawings look better. They were drawn for that. And if you look at the shot from the new Blu-ray set, all of that detail's gone. The colors are almost monochromatic, they don't look hand painted or anything anymore. They almost look like Microsoft Paint, point and do the fill can. The details on Raditz's armor here are just smeared out. If you look at that shot with people, like, their faces are missing in the top one. My favorite one is Goku on the Kintoan. The Kintoan in the Dragon Box has clear lines to make it look like a cloud. In the Blu-ray, it's just an outline, and all the details inside it have been smeared away, and it's just yellow.
Yeah.
So it looks...
it's just the coloring in the new version just looks completely flat. And it's basically the same thing when a while ago we were talking about, like, this months and months ago when we were talking about Spider-Man comics and stuff, and me going on the whole thing about why I did not like the digitally recolored comics. It has the same sort of aesthetic arrived at from, like, a slightly different direction. But it has the same thing where it's like, it just makes the image look very flat and untextured in a way that was never meant to look.
Right. There are legitimate... I've seen a lot of back and forth on this weekend. There's a legitimate discussion to be had about how much image should be shown in 4:3 Dragon Ball, because even on the Dragon Box, you're not seeing the full animation cell. If you watch the widescreen crops, you actually do get a tiny amount more. It's about 5% more left and right, because you're extending the image outward a little bit. It does not compensate for the top and bottom, which is a 20% removal top and bottom, which is a lot overall. But it is there, and the reason for this is that every animation ever done, there is more done on the animation cell itself than is shown in the final presentation, and that's for safety, basically. You animate more around the edges so you can move it around if you need to. You're going really fast photographing. If it gets moved a little bit, you're still capturing image, all of that. The Dragon Box is pretty much, it's cropped to show you everything that was intended to be seen, and you get it all there. In the day when Dragon Ball was originally aired on TV, and even when these DVDs originally came out, you would have had tube TVs, CRTs, that did have overscan, and so you would miss some of the image. And it is fair to say that the new Blu-rays are missing what you would have been missing on overscan back in the day. The problem with that argument is it's 2019, we don't have overscan anymore, and you should be able to see everything. The Dragon Boxes were released in Japan in 2003. They were released in America in 2009. I'm watching them in 2019, and I can see the full picture, and it looks great all the way around. There's no reason the Blu-ray shouldn't be able to replicate that. And again, because of that crop, you're actually seeing more of the picture on the season sets that are in widescreen and bad. There's such incompetence here, it kind of boggles the mind. Funimation should know better by now. They are a great company in so many respects. They've done so much good by Dragon Ball over the years. The fact that they can't get DBZ, and DBZ specifically outright, is maddening, because the movies, they have good versions of. Dragon Ball, the season sets, which are the blue bricks is what they call them, they're on DVD. Those are a little cropped as well, and I can explain why that is in a little bit. But they look very good. They're not DNR'd to hell. It's a decent remaster of the series. Dragon Ball GT, totally fine. Dragon Ball Super and Kai and all of that, totally fine. It's just Z, the most popular one, they can't get right.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's just like, it is, again, like, this was a big opportunity for them to fix that to the 30th anniversary, and it seemed like that's what they were trying to sort of pitch with the tease, and then the fucking trailer comes out, and it's like, I was not expecting it to be great, just because there's been so much time for it to have been turned around, at least for, like, again, like, a bare minimum, like, fairly standard looking 4x3 presentation on, like, streaming on Funimation now. Like, that's like the bare minimum, and that's not there. The last time I checked, I have not tried to stream Dragon Ball Z in a long time, but the last time I tried to is like, nope, this is the same fucking thing again. It's the same 16:9 presentation.
Yeah. By the way, the reason you might do some of this cropping for the 4x3 is because at the bottom of a 4x3 cell that goes out into the overscan area, you might have tape marks, because physical film might be taped together. That's how editing happens sometimes. And you, especially on dupe prints, which is what Funimation owns, or Betamaxes, which is the Digibetas, sorry, which is the digital masters of film prints sometimes, those tape marks might still be on there. They can be removed with careful restoration, but that takes time and money. So sometimes they just crop around those to get rid of the tape marks. That's theoretically fine if you have to do it on the cheap. Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball, they did it that way for the blue brick season sets, because that show doesn't sell as well as Z, and I think it's fine. It could be better, but whatever. With Z, I mean, this is something they're asking $350 of. It's this premium limited edition set. The reason you do that crop is to cheap out. They shouldn't be cheaping out on people paying $350 for the series. That's the basic point. Mm-hmm. So, oh well.
Someday we'll get a good release of Dragon Ball Z on Blu-ray.
I hope
that day is not this day.
I hope. Honestly, Sean, I don't think we will, because
that's a fair point. It's maybe been long enough.
It's been long enough.
Blu-ray will be dead by the time it would even happen.
Well, it's not happening from Funimation. The hope at this point would be Toei does something good with it. But I'll say, I own those Blu-rays of the movies. They're a little hit or miss. Some of the movies look amazing. They mostly look fine. Some of them do have aggressive DNR on them. There's a whole controversy around this because the Masters originally premiered on Japanese Netflix and Amazon without DNR. They look beautiful and perfect. And then on Blu-ray, some of them got DNR'd and they look worse. None of them look horrible, except maybe movie 5 that has some scenes that look horrible. Some of them, like movie 12, the fusion movie, it looks perfect. It's got grain, it's got color. Some of them have been scrubbed a little too much for my liking. None of them are to the level of Funimation's releases by any means, but it's there. And I think the worry is, those are 13-hour-long movies. If Toei has to do 600 episodes when you put GT, Original Dragon Ball, and Z together, are they going to do all the time and effort they put into the Dragon Boxes back in 2003 when physical media sold a lot more? I don't think so. I think the Dragon Boxes are going to be the best versions for the foreseeable future because they had the time and money back then to do it. I don't think they're going to take the time and money now to do it right. So if you want the best version, see if you can get your hands on the Dragon boxes, either from Japan or for Z from America. It's expensive, but that is going to be the definitive presentation, I think, for a long time to come. I do not see these restorations being done properly anytime soon.
Yep.
So there you go.
There you go.
All right. Sean, I have next on our list, this is half news, half topic, but it's how we're going to close today, which is a new segment called Hot Takes on Stupid Video Game Controversies.
Yeah, before we go into the ones you've written there, I've realized we did not quite finish up something with the Anthem discussion, that since we're back into video games, I want to top that off before we move into this other thing, because we did not fully address BioWare's initial response to Jason Schreier's piece.
Oh, that's true.
Which is so colossally terrible that I would feel bad if we did not at least address it a little bit before we move on. So for context, when Jason Schreier released his report last Tuesday in the afternoon, or around 11 or 10, I remember because I was reading it during lunch, my lunch break, which is what I do now, is I either watch videos on the Japanese Nintendo YouTube channel or I read video game news while I eat a sandwich. And so almost simultaneously to the publishing of that report, BioWare released an official response on their blog, on their website. The blog post is titled Anthem Game Development. It was released April 2nd, 2019. And it's a short response, just a couple of paragraphs long. And again, this is from whoever wrote this, and whoever authorized this being written could not possibly have read the entire report because they could not possibly have had time to. BioWare would have known some of the basic details of the report because, as is standard journalistic procedure, Jason Schreier and Kotaku reached out to BioWare for comment, giving basic details of what the report entailed so that they could provide a comment. They refused to do so, and then they effectively just did so on their own terms by releasing this blog post. Overall, the blog post is mostly kind of innocuous, we believe that we know that video game development is hard, but we believe that we're getting better at studio culture, blah, 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 blah. Then they say something near the end that is just the most insidious fucking shit I've seen a video game company say in a while now, which is people in this industry put so much passion and energy into making something fun. We don't see the value in tearing down one another or one another's work. We don't believe articles that do that are making our industry and craft better.
Hey.
Which is fucking just the worst response, is we don't think that you should, we shouldn't be trying to tear things down by releasing these kinds of reports. That's not what we're here to do. We don't believe that this makes the industry better. And it's fuck you, dude. Wow. Oh.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. Casey Hudson came out with a better statement a few days later.
Yeah.
That was internal to BioWare employees, but of course it got leaked to the press. But it also contained that line at the end again. And basically the idea, the message from BioWare as a company and then from Casey Hudson as a leader was, maybe we could do better, but don't fucking talk about it.
Yeah.
And that is so insidious. It's like the fucking mob. It's like, hey, Jimmy, don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Just don't rat to the cops. That's what it sounds like.
You keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't go outside the family. Yeah, it 100% has that feel to it, and the insinuation that this kind of reporting is somehow destructive for the video game industry, as opposed to being what it actually is, which is a call to people, the consumers and people interested in video games, the culture, and the business to be outraged that this kind of shit is happening. And Jason Schreier specifically is constantly writing, in breaking these huge stories, digging really deep into some of the most destructive habits that the video game industry has. And stuff his report about Red Dead Redemption 2 was huge. This one is huge in getting people talking about and thinking about solutions to these problems. And I feel like we are finally starting to get some sort of traction behind the idea of developers unionizing in some way in the video game industry, which is something that has been discussed for basically this whole generation of consoles. At the very least, has been a pretty active discussion that has been difficult to gain any real foothold. And I feel like we're starting to move on it, and we're starting to see different groups within the video game industry starting to like recognize the need for that kind of movement. And I think that Jason Schreier's reporting has really helped get that message out there. So like this kind of weird, like we're like team player, like no, like we keep it in the family, we keep it in the team, like anything that's like criticizing us is bad for us. It's like, no, dude, there are people in your company that think that one of your products should have failed because they want the practices and the culture within the company to improve. And since that game did not fail, it comes down to journalists to expose those kinds of stories so that the rest of the public can understand what is actually going on.
Yes. All right. You want to move on to the other controversies?
Yes. Let's move on to some of the sillier controversies from this week.
First up, this has reared its head again, because both of these are ongoing controversies, but they have both come back in the last week. This one is about Epic Game Store exclusivity and challenges to the dominance of Steam. This week, Borderlands 3, we talked about that last week, was announced. It was announced as an Epic Game Store exclusive, as many games are now. To fill you guys in, Epic is starting its own game store to compete with Steam, which currently has as close as you can get to a monopoly on the PC games market. There have been things like GOG and Humble and things like that that have tried to make a dent, but they have not made the kind of dent that has challenged Steam. What Epic Games is doing is creating an entirely different model of financing, where instead of taking I think it's like a 30% cut Steam takes, they're taking a 12% cut or something. So a lot more money is going to developers. Developers like that, therefore they are signing exclusivity contracts with Epic. And, you know, the kinds of people who use Steam are not necessarily the kinds of people known for rational, level-headed thinking. And, yeah, they're losing their mind because they are very pro-monopoly, I guess.
I mean, it feels like somehow most people have become, like, really pro-monopoly with the way that
it's a problem, yes.
has been going. Yeah, it's... Like, I definitely get, on the one hand, that, like, if you are, if you do most of your video game stuff through the PC, that means you're certainly doing most of it through Steam. And I understand the desire for people that it's more comfortable for them and easier for them to just have everything be through Steam because, you know, here's, like, my one big list of video games I have on this drop-down menu. Here's my one friends list, blah, 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 blah. So there's a part of me that understands why people get annoyed by this kind of stuff. But it's like when you look at the bigger picture, it's like, one, the PC space has been moving in this direction of having multiple stores for a while. And not just like GOG and itch.io and Humble, which are kind of trying to do a Steam-esque thing. But we also have Origin, and we have Uplay, although Ubisoft tends to put their games out on both. But we have like the Microsoft like Windows Game Store, where all the Microsoft exclusives come out. And there was another one. Oh, we have Blizzard with like Activision stuff on Battle.net. Because there's Destiny 2, which Activision doesn't own anymore, but Destiny 2 was through Battle.net. I don't think they've moved Call of Duty over yet, but they are probably going to soon if they haven't. And so we already exist in a space where there are multiple different launchers and multiple different stores. Twitch actually has their own store. Like, most people don't use it, but that Twitch has a store. Fucking even like Discord, the chat app, they have a fucking video game store. Like, there are lots of different stores that do exist in this space because Steam has been fucking shit up for long enough now that it's making room for other people, I think. But Epic is the one that has the biggest claim and the biggest stake in is making the biggest moves to try to become like a prime player in the space, as opposed to everybody else who are either dealing mostly in small buckets of games that are made by for EA and Origin. Just EA games are, as far as I understand, the only games that are actually on Origin, or they're something like itch.io or GOG that are doing games from lots of different developers, but on a smaller scale and a slightly more specialized fashion. Epic feels like they are poised to, once their service and launcher becomes fully matured, start to really push Steam and Valve into a corner and potentially take over market dominance, which would be a pretty amazing move if they could get that to happen. which doesn't necessarily mean that Epic would be better than Valve if they became the monopoly and if we had like a whole cycle thing going on. But there's something very necessary, I think, to having legitimate competition in the PC space, and it's something that's been necessary since I started playing PC games in like 2008 or 9, like actively, and started using Steam around that period. And I am personally like kind of relieved, actually, even if Epic's not perfect, to have them like putting Steam on the defensive for a little bit feels good.
Valve is one of the worst and most insidious corporations at work in America today. They are bad. They are bad for video games. They are bad for culture. They are bad for people. They should be wiped off the face of the fucking earth. And if it takes the Fortnite people to do that, I welcome our Fortnite overlords. We don't need to relitigate all the controversies, Sean.
Yeah.
I'll just say it was not even a month ago that Valve was refusing to move on a fucking rape sim video game, getting that off their platform. Valve is an evil, shitty corporation, and they have done this entirely to themselves by being bad at being evil. They are the Donald Trump of video games. They are awful, and they're not even good at being awful. So let's dispense with the stupid, oh, but you know what if it's just a new corporate overlord? We'll worry about that when we get to it, but so far, Epic has not done anything anywhere near as bad as the shit Valve has done. And if you having to use one launcher instead of 5 to launch your fucking video games, if you think that's worth more than having fucking rape sims out there being pitched directly at the most violent incel bullshit in this community, you can go fuck yourself. I'm sorry. Because you know what would be better than 5 launchers? Just fucking DRM-free games that come out and you launch them from your fucking PC. That's the problem, not the launchers. But that's not being solved anytime soon. So for now, you will have to mouse a half a centimeter over and launch something else. I'm so fucking sorry that your existence is so difficult. Fuck you. That's my reaction to this one. Fuck you. It's going to be my reaction to the next one also. This is a stupid controversy. Competition is good. We live in a capitalist society. Capitalism is supposed to be built on competition. And also, Valve is evil. Fuck Valve.
Yeah, it's definitely the fucking... Because I don't think we ever talked about it on the podcast with the rape game that you referenced. So it's just the fucking libertarian tech bullshit that I feel like we have, like, at least I have to say that phrase once a month on this podcast, because it's like, fucking Jesus. I mean, the last time we talked about it was with Google and Stadia. It's like, fucking, we're being delivered to hell by these goddamn companies. And it is this, like, sense of just complete lack of care and empathy that these companies express. And the blatant nature in which they do so is just saying this, like, no, man, hands off. The market will take care of it. And it's like, that's not... One, that's just not even what you're doing. That's never been what anyone has ever done when they say that phrase of like laissez-faire, man. You just like, it's like, no, you are expressing power. You are enforcing some form of politic. Like, don't pretend like you're not doing anything. You are doing shit. You are privileging things over others. Stop trying to hide behind this like fucking defense, because nobody's ever been able to fucking do that. But then also just a sense of like that it's a bad thing for your company and your individual slice of the market space to be something that you procure and you define and you build and you make to represent and stand for and carry specific kinds of items, as opposed to being this thing is like, no, we want our one slice of this, like slice of the economy and the market to be actually the entire thing, which is what leads to this like monopoly effect where companies just want to consume and represent everything in our culture and everything that one can consume as a product, and they want to control and manage all of it, and think that that's somehow what is represented by the idea of like a laissez-faire economy, which isn't even that ideal on its own, isn't even good, but their way of going about it is one stupid and even worse and even more wrong-headed. And it's really fucking infuriating to see this individual company try to strike this attitude. It's not just Valve, it's a lot of these kinds of companies, but all these kinds of companies strike this attitude in a way that feels so phenomenally ignorant that even someone like me, that the only economics class I've ever taken was an AP micro econ class in high school. Although the only reason that's the only one I had to take is because I did get like a 4 or 5 on the AP test, so I didn't have to take anything in college.
I did
so
too. We should tell the story of that class someday, Sean, because that class was a fucking joke.
Yeah, that class was a fucking joke because a lot of economy and like economics as this field of study sometimes feels like a fucking joke. But like even I understand enough about economic theory to know that like your approach doesn't actually make sense, and it's morally bankrupt and destructive and incredibly harmful. And it's like, you know, like Epic taking over is not an ideal scenario, but it's better than what we have right now. And it is very satisfying to see Valve on its heels. It's very satisfying to see another company move into that space in a way that is not just them like cowering under the umbrella of Valve and being like, it's okay, we're just off on our thing. We're Epic, we'll just put out our games on our little launcher. We won't deal with you, and have someone else go like, no, fuck it. No, we're going to pay people, and we're going to pay developers to put a game out on our store, and it's going to only be on our store for 6 months, because fuck those guys. That's the only way that anybody can make any headway into the PC market space anyways, is to try to pay for exclusivity until they can get enough of a foothold that they can create a service that will attract people in a more natural, organic process. It's the only way that Epic could even do it, because Valve has had such a monopoly in the space for over a decade at this point.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I also think if Epic can make it work to have a store deal that gives more money to developers and publishers, that could be a good thing in the long run, like for the economics of gaming. I think the question is whether, Epic is a very well-to-do company, we could say, to begin with, if that is a sustainable model for the storefront owners, but I think that's a question for another day. For now, I think these are good developments from the side of Epic, because, you know, I don't know a ton about Epic, but I know they've never done the kind of shit Valve does with their fucking rape and school shooting games. I have never seen Epic's Twitter account make fun of trans people the way GOG's Twitter account does. Yeah. So, you know, for now, they're the better, they're the lesser of multiple evils.
Yeah, I feel like the worst controversy Epic has had is like all the stuff with like the lawsuits around like their dances that they stole from people. But like Epic's not the only people like that. I think that's more of a problem with like our culture recognizing dance as like a legitimate art
that's
form.
Like a patent law problem, Epic. You know, like a patent and copyright
law. It's not just Epic, for sure.
Okay. Finally, Sean, video game easy modes. Why should we never have them, and why are you and I such fucking pussies for bringing them up on the podcast in the first place?
So, the first thing I want to say is that people, if you are interested in diving into the discourse around easy modes in From Software games, go to the most recent episode of Waypoint Radio, because they covered it, and that discussion was really good, and Austin Walker is easily the best critic working in games talking about From Software stuff. He's always even if his favorite From game is Dark Souls 2, although it might be Sekiro, might be his new favorite. So he's good in that regard. Dark Souls 2, I disagree with him. But generally speaking, I find his thoughts on From games really fascinating and really powerful. So that's a really great discussion to go to. So if you want to get other thoughts and like other kind of deep dive, because they talk for literally, I think, an hour on this topic. For a recap for people who don't know what we're referencing, there has been a thing going around video game discourse since when did Dark Souls come out? Like 2011. So it's been like 8 years or 9 years at this point, where like you can set your fucking watch by every time one of these games comes out. We have to start talking about this shit. And in that Waypoint Radio discussion, Austin Walker frames it in a really good way, where he says that there's like a dozen topics in video game criticism that we have been talking about in going back to the idea of cycles at the beginning of this podcast. Another cycle. Video game criticism moves through this like dozen or so hot takes about like, how do you break into the industry? Are video games like really art? Like blah, blah, blah. Like those sort of topics that always come up in this weird cycle. That we just can't seem to escape from, because that's the way that social media creates popular discourse in the modern world. One of those being, because these games are about as old as Twitter, One of those being, should these From Software games, most notably like, Dark Souls games, should these have easy modes? Because they do not and have not as of now, and I can't even think of any like spin-off one of like The Surge or Neo that has what you would traditionally call an easy mode, which is to say you boot up the game and there's easy, normal, hard, very hard, whatever, the way that like every shooters are a good genre to go to for like, here's your like 5 difficulty modes, pick your poison, go with whatever you want. They have never had that, either for easy or hard. There are ways to make the games harder, and there are ways to make the games easier, but they have never had explicit modes that you pick at the beginning of the game to decide what difficulty you want to be on. And so, obviously, a big talking point with these games has always been their difficulty. There are lots of reasons why it is hard to move away from that discussion. One of the reasons, like on this podcast, why I feel like it comes up for me a lot is because since I'm the only one who plays these games, it is hard to have an in-depth discussion that goes beyond that surface level. Like, boy, these games are really hard. And I think a lot of that is true across a lot of like different video game podcasts and websites, that it ends up being this very surface level thing, and it's hard to talk about these games in depth without like getting through the difficulty, like, oh, these games are very hard thing. And so, since we always talk about how hard they are, we always then talk about like should we make them easier? Should they be more accessible? So on and so forth. And that just has happened for Dark Souls. We had it for Dark Souls 2. We had it for Bloodborne. We had it for Dark Souls 3. And now we've had it for Sekiro. And I'm fucking tired of it, Jonathan. I just can't do it. It's so annoying. It's so fucking, I cannot express how annoying it is that every time we have to have this discussion.
Because there should never be an easy mode, and if you don't like that, you should never play video games, right, Sean? Because that's not what real gaming is, right?
No. So one reason why it's just a terrible discussion constantly, because it just nothing happens. I feel like this time at least, I think the framing of accessibility that we'll come to, that I feel like has not been an element we've generally talked about with this. It's mostly just been framed purely around the idea of difficulty and people that don't enjoy the difficulty or have a hard time getting past like the early parts of the game, make it easier for they can get it, as opposed to this new bent of like, well, there are just people who, have a muscular issue with their hand and like just cannot press the button fast enough to parry 7 attacks in a row. Should we design something so that those people can access the game and think about accessibility in that way? Short answer to that question is yes, we should, and games should implement that kind of stuff. So I think that element at least has had a slightly different bent. I don't think it's enough of a bent that we should have been talking about only this for this fucking game for like 3 weeks now or whatever. And that's the only way we should look at difficulty and accessibility, because we never have this conversation with any other fucking game. And it's one reason why I think we're not getting anywhere with the discourse. One thing that is annoying is that Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3 all have mechanics in them that are effectively a kind of easy mode. They all have mechanics that allow you to have other people come into your universe in the game, into your world, and help you clear areas and fight bosses, which makes the game considerably easier. Most new players to those games, however, do not really know that those systems exist or how to engage with them, because it's obscure in the way that everything in these games are obscure. And so I think there are a lot of people who don't realize that there are a number of tools you could take advantage of that would make the game considerably easier, that would make the game more accessible for you, and you could get through it. It's just everything in these games is very obtuse, and so it's hard to know how to do that when you are fresh to the game and get pushed away from it, because it's very hard on the front of it. So that's one thing I want to point out, is like, these games always have had, other than Sekiro is different, but the Soulsborne games have always had mechanics in them to make them easier. I think those games have also had a certain excuse with their online element of, I can see that it would be hard to design that game and have discrete difficulty settings, because it would section off the player base and make invasions and cooperative play online hard, because you'd have to balance out the difficulty in some way. Not to say that that's an impossible problem. I think those games have had better excuses for not having these in the past. Sekiro should straight up have an easy mode. I think like it should have a thing that when you load up the game, and like for the first time, it should say like, here's, if you have never played a game like this before, pick this mode. And you have like just the standard, you have more health, you have more posture, you do more damage, that kind of thing. and then here's like, I don't think it should have a hard mode. I think it should have a like, here's if you do like, if you have a difficulties playing these kinds of games, here's a mode for you. Then here's our standard difficulty. I don't think there's nothing about Sekiro that prevents it from having that in any way. There's no online connectivity. There are no alternative mechanics that make the game explicitly easier, like summons do in the Dark Souls games. And so, like, Sekiro should just have that. I do understand, as someone who's a big fan of these games, I know why people get frustrated at the idea of the easy mode, because I think there is an element that people who maybe don't play these games sometimes can't see about how satisfying it is for someone like me of just being like, it feels like the difficulty is tuned for me specifically as a player. I like hard games, and there's something nice about me not having the question of what mode I should play on. And so I get why there are people for whom there's something very comfortable about this having this one like default setting, and there's no question about it. Like, and I think that there is something that is legitimate about like, it makes it easier for some people to be able to engage that game, that they never have to ask the question of difficulty, and particularly the first time you play one of these games, if you get absorbed into it. I know where that feeling comes from. I do not think that feeling is more valuable, though, than making the game more accessible by having an easier mode. I think that is more important than the comfort of, this is the default difficulty. This is like, it feels specifically tuned and designed in this way. I get the comfort of that, but I don't think it's something that we should privilege over the alternative. That is my take.
My turn?
That is my take. Yes.
I roll my eyes so fucking hard at every inch of this stupid fucking conversation. And you know why I do it? Because I've been playing Nintendo games my entire life. And in the early 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s, around the era of the Wii and when the 3DS launched, Nintendo made a very clear, conscious choice where developers very clearly wanted to make the games harder, and Nintendo had this big multi-generational audience of people both young and old who were not going to engage with the hardest games. And so what they decided was a really good, robust set of difficulty options that they have had this entire decade, and every time I hear this conversation, nobody brings it up, and I'm over here like, it exists, it works, it's fine, everybody shut the fuck up. There's an entire corner of gaming that is more successful than any of this stuff, where this is not a question anymore. So, for instance, the best one I can give an example on this is Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Awakening, which was at the time the highest selling Fire Emblem game, gave that series life. The series was almost dead, and it came back on the 3DS, and one of the things they did is it's very clearly signaled when they start the game. There is classic mode, and I think that's a really good way to say it, which is, this is Fire Emblem, this is the game as we intended it, this has permadeath, this is what you want to play if you want to play Fire Emblem. There is also, and I forget, it's not called easy mode, but it's something like, a different mode that's like new mode or something like that. This is where you will not have permadeath. It's a little more forgiving. This is, if you are scared to play a game where you lose your units, you play this. And it has never, for a single person, for a single second, ever been a fucking problem. And I know that because I've played every Fire Emblem game to come out since then, and it's never been a problem for me selecting classic mode, sticking with classic mode, even bumping it up a difficulty, because sometimes there might... Because, yes, I think Awakening and Fates also have the hard mode on top of that you can do if you want. And it's not a problem. I don't think, like, when I've restarted 5 times and it's on classic mode and there's permadeath and I need to restart to save my unit, like, I should just go play the other mode. And I don't think that because it's how I enjoy the game, it's what Fire Emblem is to me. I don't have to think about that, but there's a lot of people who come in and play Fire Emblem and enjoy it and would never have been able to play that game and come into the fold if Nintendo hadn't made that choice. That choice did nothing to dilute the experience of Fire Emblem, but it did a lot to free up the developers to make the game they wanted to make and not have to compromise their vision to get good big sales out of it. This also has dramatically impacted the Mario series, where with New Super Mario Bros. Wii, the first one on a home console, they made a very clear decision. We're going to make a hard-as-nails Mario game, which had not happened in a while from Nintendo, but we're going to make some very clear accessibility options for younger people and parents and anyone else who wants to play it, and they had like the guide mode and things like that. When they made Donkey Kong Country Returns, there had not been a first-party, Nintendo platformer like that was so tough as nails since the days of the Super NES. The reason they were able to get away with it is they had accessibility and easy options in it. And it happened again with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is one of the best games of the decade. It might be my number 1 or 2 for the entire decade, and part of that is that they were able to throw in, like on the Wii, on the re-release on Switch, Funky Mode, which you don't have to think about it for a second if you don't want to, but it's there and allows people to play a game that otherwise might have just been too hard for people to engage with. And they're doing this, they've done this on most of their major games. It has made Nintendo's game development this decade, I think, a lot more interesting than the decade that preceded it, in large part because of options about, easiness and accessibility and multiple age groups playing. And when you play it, you don't think about it, you play the game you want to play. And it is just such a tone-deaf, ridiculous conversation to be this gatekeeping bullshit of, no, the game can only be good for me if all it has is what I want in it. That's ridiculous. That would be, Sean, if like you and me got on this podcast and talked about Halo and said everyone who didn't play Halo on Heroic or Legendary is a loser and doesn't get it and doesn't deserve to play, and Bungie shouldn't even have ever put it in there. There's a reason we have difficulty options. I understand there are some, technical and development things in the Dark Souls universe that makes this harder, and I don't even blame From Software for this. They got to make what they got to make. I think they should add accessibility options, probably, if for no other reason than for gamers with disabilities and different abilities. But it's really the people gatekeeping online about this and harassing people over it that drives me fucking crazy, because the counterfactuals to their points of view are rampant, they are everywhere, and they are easily obvious.
So one thing I will say to that, and again, I don't want to be on the side like defending keeping this exclusionary, because it's not what I believe, but I do think one of the reasons why this discourse has become very cyclical is because I think there are a lot of people for whom the statement like, if there's 3 different difficulty modes, you just pick your difficulty mode and you just ignore that the other ones exist and it's never a problem for you, have a hard time understanding that that is not true for everybody. And I know this because when I was younger, it was something that was harder for me. That if I wanted to play a game and push myself to play something on a harder difficulty, it was hard to always resist the temptation of like, fuck this, I'll just bump it down to normal. And I definitely get, because there are people that are saying this, like, well, no, like one of the things that draws me to Dark Souls is knowing that that's never something I have to think about. It's never something I have to fight with myself of like, I could always just make this easier. I could always just do this thing or like turn this knob, like flip this switch, and it would be easier, and I would just be able to beat this boss that way. And then if you give into, because this is something I have done before with games, if you give into that and you bump down the difficulty and you just say it's like, no, like that option is there, and it's like this thing that like you let yourself do it, you ruin the whole game for yourself, because now you have all of a sudden the challenge feels like it has no meaning because you like broke some sort of unspoken rule. Most people, I think, probably don't have an issue with that. There are some people that do, and like that is legitimate. Like, in the existence of the option, I do think for some people legitimately materially affects the way they approach and think about and play the game.
But to me, that
does not overrule or override that. I think it's more valuable to have the multiple different difficulty modes because it opens it up to a larger audience. It opens it up to people who would not otherwise be able to play the game for like disability reasons is more important. But I do think it should at least be acknowledged that like there are people for whom the existence of those options does affect the way they understand and play the game. Like that is real. They're not just making that up.
I get that. Nobody is saying that with the level of nuance you are saying it right now. And the other...
Well, no, because I think for most people, most people that are in that position are younger. I think most of them are teenagers. And it's one thing that's like really important to remember when you're on Twitter, especially now that I am teaching teenagers, that's like a lot of these people are fucking kids. And it's like they're fucking dumb and they don't know anything about themselves. and how they experience something, and they do not have the amount of self-knowledge to be able to express that opinion in a nuanced way, in a way that I wouldn't have been able to when I was 16 years old.
I get that, and I've been in these situations before where I bumped a difficulty down and was disappointed in myself, but I guess that's a me issue. That's the person doing that, choosing that, feeling that way, or having that impulse. I think it's different than the game itself and what is necessary for the community and for the health of the medium. And I know you're saying that one outweighs the other. It just, I don't know. It's presented in such absolutist fashion. It gets picked up everywhere. The debate feels so bereft of again, I think there's a lot of examples where this works fine. I remember there being the panic when Fire Emblem Awakening came out about adding that easy mode, and no one talks about that anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's some trolls online, but I'm pretty engaged with this stuff, and I don't hear people being angry about having to choose the words classic mode when it comes up. I think like with Dark Souls or something, there's probably a pretty clear way you could label this where it's an established enough series where you could, I know you can't get rid of that impulse entirely, but you can minimize it to the degree where the good it's doing is so far outweighing the bad, I don't know how we could ever debate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I agree. I think that one of the reasons why it is such an entrenched fucking thing is because these games have simply never had it, and these games have like a very dedicated, very passionate community because nobody makes games like this. But it's like, it's also just like fucking, it's fucking Twitter. Like, because I saw that you retweeted this, but like fucking dozens of people on my goddamn timeline retweeted this terrible fucking embarrassing goddamn tweet. That's I have no idea how old the person is. I'm just gonna call them a kid, bro. That's like,
they're either a
like
kid in body or a kid at heart.
Yeah, like whatever it is, like of just like, oh no, like it's a hollow. If you do this, it's a hollow victory. Like blah blah blah. Like in this whole thing, and it's like, it just made me think. It's like, who is this person? And why am I seeing this tweet? Like, why? And why am I not just seeing this tweet from Jonathan? Why am I seeing this tweet from, like, fucking 15 people all retweeting this and making fun of this? And then I, like, went onto that dude's Twitter account because every once in a while I was just curious. And he was just like, yep, I guess that fucking Sekiro tweet is still getting retweets. And it's like, what has social media fucking done to this? That's like some random person can write something truly profoundly embarrassing on the internet, and it gets passed around and gets like signal boosted to this absurd extent that like I start seeing it like multiple times in one day. It's bad.
That dude in the picture looks like he's 30 or 40 years old, just to be clear. Yeah. But yeah,
again, whether he's actually a kid or
yeah, and there's videos of him on his YouTube channel. He's definitely a full grown adult. So
yeah,
I mean, look, it's complicated. I get all this. It just, again, I'll say, as someone who I have absolutely dealt with, like what you were talking about there, where sometimes there's that impulse to go to a lower difficulty and try it a different way. I will say, though, when I talk about why I use the Nintendo examples, is that those are the kinds of games where I think once upon a time I would have felt that way. And the way they signal it and how thoughtful they have been in figuring out how to implement difficulty options, I never have that impulse. And I play all of these. And sometimes they can be extremely tough and frustrating. But, when, like in New Super Mario Bros. U or something, the Luigi block pops up where Luigi will walk you through the level or something and do it for you, I've just never felt the impulse to try that. I think there are very clear ways, because they'll do things like they'll put a mark by your level completion and say you got through it, but you yourself didn't really complete it. And it's not done in a way where it feels like it's shaming if someone chooses to do that. Like, I don't think a little kid's going to care that much. But if you're someone for whom that would be like, nah, I want it to be the full mark, it's just never going to enter your head. So, I think it would behoove the rest of the industry, frankly, to look at what Nintendo has done with this and think about it, because they're a company that has actively had to straddle this and figure it out. And I think they've figured it out. So that's why I get frustrated when we act like this is a complete hypothetical and it's like we have to invent it from fucking scratch, difficulty modes in video games. Like, it's like a foundational thing of the medium.
Yeah. I mean, also, there's something... This is another reason why I'm so fucking, because again, like I have been a big fan of these games since Dark Souls. I've just seen this fucking conversation happen so many times, and it's very frustrating that like we never get to, on the accessibility front. I feel like it's very frustrating that things that are way more significant, like for Nintendo is actually famously terrible about like true accessibility of like, you know, on the Switch you can't remap buttons or anything like that the way that you've been able to do for years on the PS4 and the Xbox One, and that never gets any like discussion, and that affects so many more people, but we spend so much time on this one game. And then also, just generally speaking, difficulty modes are done very poorly in games, in the sense of like it is generally just this very like, you have 50% more health, the enemies have 50% less health, and that's just like you just kind of slap it together. And in that market, I like, again, I as someone who's a big fan of these games, it's impossible for me not to have some amount of just like, but man, the game feels so perfectly and precisely tuned that like I do have like this gut like resistance to the idea of like a slider that changes that kind of stuff. Which again, like I have to resist that, because I do think that those kinds of options would ultimately be better for the game.
Have you ever seen any? So the creator of Celeste, the famous indie game from last year, Matt Thornton, the developer of that game, has done some really great interviews about this, because there's a really good set of accessibility and difficulty options in Celeste. And he's talked about how it was hard for him to implement that, because it was kind of a one-man team for the game design, at least, not for every element of it, but for the level design. And those levels are like, you know, finely tuned watches to him, and are real works of art to make it exactly how he wanted it to be played. But he had to admit to himself at the end of the day, as much as that's how he wanted it to be, art does not belong fully to its creator. And it was important to let other people come and play in the park by implementing some of that, and it doesn't dilute it for anyone else. For if you're trying to play it hard, but it's there if you need it, so you can see a story that is about acceptance is what Celeste is, and so having that in there was really important. And I think he's also written some really smart things about it this weekend. So, you know, my view is that if a one-man development team like Matt Thornton can do it on Celeste, I think From Software could. I think a lot of developers could. I agree that it's stupid that we only talk about this with From Software, because, you know, accessibility and difficulty are two different, sometimes intertwined, sometimes not issues. And yes, Nintendo is really good on the difficulty stuff, less good, obviously, on the accessibility stuff. So this should be a broader conversation than just whenever From Software launches a game, because ultimately, you know, it's their game. They can do whatever the fuck they want. But, like, as a cultural conversation, you know, I would take the lead from a very smart developer like that who's actually lived it.
Yeah. No, I look forward to 3 years from now when Sekiro 2 comes out, and this is the fucking same thing happens again. Cycles, man.
Yeah.
We're trapped. We're trapped in the cycles.
So, Sean, this got kind of heavy. I want to close the show before we say goodbye for the week.
Okay, I don't know what this is. This is not on my outline.
I'm going to read you a little more of the Cat's plot synopsis.
Oh, God.
I read you the first 2 paragraphs. I'm going to read you the last 2 paragraphs. You're going to react, and then we're done. All right?
Okay. I'm also going to bring it up so I can read along with you to help my reading comprehension.
Okay, so it's Cats, the Broadway musical. This is the end of Act 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
After the fight, Rum Tum Tugger suggests that the Cats should find a local magician, made Mr. Mistopheles, also known as the original Conjuring Cat, for help. According to Tugger, Mr. Mistopheles is small and black and can perform feats of magic that no other cat can do. Mr. Mistopheles performs a solo dance, restores the lights, and brings back Old Deuteronomy. Now the jellicle choice can be made. Before Old Deuteronomy can announce his decision, Grisabella returns to the junkyard, and he allows her to address the gathering. Her faded appearance and lonely disposition have little effect on her song. With acceptance and encouragement from Jemima and Victoria, her appeal succeeds, and she is chosen to be the one to go to the Heaviside Lair and be reborn to a new jellicle life. This sounds like a fucking JRPG. Okay. A large tire rises from the piles of junk, carrying Grisabella and Old Deuteronomy partway to the sky. He then steps off so she can finish the journey on her own. Finally, Old Deuteronomy gives his closing speech to the audience, and the show comes to a close.
Yeah, so we're definitely living in the darkest timeline. We're definitely living in the darkest version of the cycle. And now that you've given us that, I will close out. I have not pre-read this, so I don't know if this will be funny. I'm just assuming this will be funny. I'm going to read to you the first stanza from The Addressing of Cats, which is the last song in the Cats musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber. You've heard of several kinds of cat, and my opinion now is that you should need no interpreter. To understand our character, you've learned enough to take the view that cats are very much like you. You've seen us both at work and games, and learnt about our proper names, our habits and our habitat, but how would you address a cat?